Do all of our meetings over here on this side of the house. We'll do it with a prayer. And I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to ask somebody who's not on the committee, but somebody who has had one of these bills come up. And I think we had a 2-hour hearing on it just a couple of weeks ago in the Senate, and that's Senator Max Burns. If Senator, I think you're on mic 3.
Correct.
If you would open this meeting up with a prayer, I'd greatly appreciate it.
If you'll join me, please, as we pray. Father God, we're blessed. We're blessed for the opportunities of service and health and life this morning. And we thank you for the blessings of the day. Give us your wisdom and your will as we continue to do the business for the people of Georgia. Guide us as we work. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Thank you. I would like to recognize the majority leader from over in the Senate, good friend of ours, Representative Chuck Efstration. And I appreciate his concern and involvement in this issue, because it's very rare that we have an issue that we don't think being that big of a deal all of a sudden becomes that big of a deal. Like I said, this is the two bills we're hearing today will be the second and third pieces of legislation that this subcommittee has dealt with. And I want to thank Chairman Albers for having the confidence in me to run these subcommittee meetings. And to give everybody fair warning, and some of you know this, I think a lot of times we move a lot of legislation through this building way too fast. We don't dissect it enough to look at the ins and outs of it. I think sometimes we pay closer attention to the little things than we do the things we should be paying attention to. And this has become a problem, these cameras, and confusion, misunderstanding of what it is from community to community. Today we have, related to the speed cameras, we have two very different pieces of legislation. Oddly enough, carried by two close friends of mine. One of them is, he's like a great-grandfather to me. And the other one,
And Representative Washburn.
and then there's Representative Washburn, who we came in together and did all of our freshman training and everything else together, and became good friends at our time in Athens together, watching after each other and learning what we were supposed to do when we got here. But something I need to do prior to that, not to disappoint anybody, but there was also a piece of legislation that came out of the House that Chairman Albers asked me to look at also. And so is Representative Sharper here? Representative Sharper? Representative Sharper is carrying HB 69 related to motor vehicles and sale of food or beverages from food trucks. Okay, well, maybe he'll be here toward the end, and maybe we can discuss his legislation. But with that said, I'd like to ask Chairman Powell to come up, if he would, and Chairman, let you have a seat. It's early in the morning, and to put your pretty face where the millions of Georgians who are watching this on live stream can see you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen and grandson. A little preface to this bill, something that y'all all know, and that's that these school-zone cameras have reached a fever pitch with the irateness of a lot of the Georgians. Representative Washburn, my colleague, had put in a bill, and I had said from the well of the House that if I lived in the Macon-Bibb County area, I do not blame him for the bill that he put in to ban these cameras. The numbers that I've heard, that they have taken in about $6.5 million down there in the Bibb County area. At the behest of the House leadership, they had asked me to bring forth another bill. It's not a banishment, but to try to rein this practice in. Now, I want to say something up front. A lot of folks have cursed the cameras. They've cursed the, I guess, the companies that produce them. But they're only a tool. When this bill was passed 7 years ago to do school zone cameras, it was a public safety measure. and it was all about slowing traffic down in school zones. Now, over a period of years, and I don't know where it came from, but there'd been amendments put onto this that did various and sundry things. For instance, tagging them to the Revenue Department to put a hold on the tags and the titles if they didn't pay, since this is a civil citation and not a traffic offense. You know, I looked at this thing, and I'm very familiar. I'm lucky. I don't have, in the 3 counties I represent, nobody has a school zone camera. The nearest one to me is a place called Tallulah Falls, out in the middle of nowhere, going up 17. And they have tagged more folks up there, so that's the closest that I can get 30 miles away from my home. So at the behest of the leadership, we started cobbling this thing together. And I will tell you that it has been, yes, it has been a tool to slow folks down. But the irateness, and we respond. I'm not telling you guys anything, you guys and ladies anything you don't know, but we respond to the public. Representative Washburn's put in a bill. My good friend Senator Burns has a bill out there. But if you'll take a good look at this bill, and I'm sure you probably already have, there's a number of things that we put in here. And that's to rein these things in, that these are not a revenue generator, which a lot of jurisdictions have, and I'm sure y'all have heard the same thing I have. It's not just Macon Bibb, but some of the small towns have raised $500,000 and things like that. That goes into the coffers of the cities. So I would be remiss if I didn't say that while these are a tool for public safety, they've also become a revenue generator. I'm not quite old enough, despite the good chairman's opinion, but I wasn't around when Lester Maddox put up billboards coming in and out of Ludowici as a speed trap. But that's pretty well close to what's happened to the volume of this. If you'll look in this, and we're dealing from, I think you should have LC 394729S. If you'll look through this bill, and it's fairly simple, but if you look on Section 2, we're requiring that they put signage up 500 feet prior to the school zones, and these would be flashing signs with the radar detecting thing that tells them how fast they're running. It's always been a pretty good tool to slow folks down if they're looking at these signs. Section 5 on page 4. One of the things that I had thought about is that we have a situation in Georgia that we have the 10-mile-an-hour variance. Everywhere you go in the state of Georgia, interstate and everywhere else, we all know that you've got a 9-mile-an-hour gap everywhere in the state. And what this is an attempt to unify that 10-mile-an-hour variance so that the only law enforcement agency that can actually detect you is the Georgia State Patrol for the exact speed. This gives the 10-mile-an-hour variance, just like you do on the interstate and such as that. On top of page 5, line 9192, we clearly define, since so much of the animosity has been given about the times. We've had people say that they've been ticketed in the middle of the day, in the middle of the night, and other things. So what we've done is we clearly put in here 1 hour before and 1 hour after the official school starting time, and the same for the afternoon, an hour before, an hour after the official dismissal time. If you'll look further down on lines 101, 102, this deals with the 4 lanes that has been somewhat of a issue, and allows DOT through their rules and regs to deal with these. You get down to line 111 and on line 111 and thereabouts. Currently, the citation, let's see, I'm trying to think what it is. Currently, the citation, the first offense is $75, second offense is $125, and there's a $25 admin fee. And what we've attempted doing here, we've had the first one will be $75, the second violation and subsequent will be $125, and we did away with the $25 admin. Now, I don't know what all of the different, there's only, best I can been able to find out, there's 4 camera companies that work the state of Georgia. Some seem to be better than others, best I can tell. If we do the $125, there shouldn't be a need for an admin fee. Now, we looked at, in all the stuff that we explored in here, we're talking about tons of money that comes in to local law enforcement agencies. So, on the top of page 6, section 2, you'll see this is just defines a legitimate agency, so that people, when they get a citation in the mail, they don't discard it. So they will have to an envelope with a prominent displays the name and the seal and the logo of that governing authority. Top of page 7, line 145. It clearly states in large letters that they have rights, and that's a notice of their rights, that you will have the right to contest the liability by contacting the local court. Let's see. On page 9, starting at line 112, wherever the statute was changed, that these citations are sent to the Department of Revenue, that they can't get a tag or a title when they renew. We've taken that language out. That goes down to the next line, 235 on the next page. At the bottom of page 10 on 241, we define the schools and for safety purposes. We also move to the next page, and right now, whatever the local governments or the law enforcement agencies are, and I understand there's two different ways. Some of them pay the camera companies by subscription. Some of them pay a set fee for each citation. So in this, what we've done is as we have dropped it to $125 max or $75, this clearly states that of that money, that local jurisdiction can keep half that money, but in half of that money, they will pay the camera company, whichever way they pay them, and the rest of that money is remitted to their local school systems for school safety projects. That's, quite frankly, I thought that was a pretty fair deal. If we're talking about public safety and folks need it, because y'all are all on the budget committee, y'all seen the budget and what we're trying to do for school safety, this would send a good bit of money to the local school system, or it will return it to the school safety projects at the schools. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the gist of this bill. Be glad to stand for questions.
Any, Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Chairman Powell. It was great to see you. Thank you for your thorough work on this bill. I'm going to start in the back and just work my way up on a couple questions.
Sure.
I understand your logic as the splitting of the revenue. Certainly everybody's concerned about school safety. My contention has always been that the roads in front of the school are not the schools. They don't maintain those roads. They are not responsible for the public safety of those roads. It is the local jurisdiction, the sheriff's office, the local police department, whatever it is. So when it came time to look at whatever revenues generated, because if we had someone out there running radar and citing someone for speeding, those revenues would go back to whatever jurisdiction of that originated that from. So while I think it's noble for us to consider how do we take dollars and put to schools, I wonder if we're diverting something that's made to be in a city and a county over to schools just because it happens to be the road in front of them. And my concern is precedence as well. What will happen if it's in front of something else next? If somebody will say, well, it's in front of my building, I'd like those dollars too. And I see the money grab going on. I'm making this a long question. I don't mean to be, but what we've seen is local jurisdictions argue with each other because the school said, well, no, unless I get my hand out, I don't want someone else to do something as well. And it seems that if this is truly about the safety of the kids, which I question some of the work that people have done on this like you have over the years, if it's truly about the safety of the kids, then why are we arguing about the dollars sometimes? So I guess One of the things we had looked at in the past was taking some of those dollars and putting them into the police officer annuity benefit fund to help out our law enforcement officers, because they're the actual folks who would have to patrol that area. And knowing that, from my mind, that's the most important group that we're always going to take care of, because if we call 911 and they don't show up, nothing else matters. So I guess I'd like to explore a little more with you if I could. Again, long question and roundabout to get to where it was of why we would give it to the schools when they have no responsibility necessarily to that road.
Well, this language came at the behest of working with leadership. My first thoughts was that half that money should be remitted to the state treasury, because looking at the budget that we have just done, we're putting a lot of money into school safety. And because of the argument that we've always had about dedicating of funds, it's always been questionable. I had thought that money, if it was remitted to the state, given how much that we in our state budget we're putting into school safety, that we could have doled it out equally around the state. But because the argument won out over me, and as you understand, you may think what you do, but I'm not the final decision maker. And the next option was to show the folks that if they're actually being cited, then that money's going to go back locally to those local schools. We have, if you'll look on line 241, it spells out where that money could be spent to the local school systems for both public and private elementary and secondary schools to enhance and ensure the protection of the students, staff, visitors, and went on and on and on. Control system, communication system, cyber security, perimeter security, surveillance systems, visitor management. So, that was just that was a combination of work that was cobbled through there. And of course, at the will of the committee, we'll do whatever.
Sure.
Or we will negotiate it, whatever, because I have no doubt that there'll be changes to the bill. And I'm cognizant of whatever the actions of the committee is here in the Senate, that it'll have to go back to the House and it'll have to be agreed on. But I would tell you that the animosity about these cameras are so hot over in the House. I don't know what would pass, quite honestly. So, that's, and whatever your idea is, I support law enforcement. I think, as my grandson had said, he and I have been quite close over the years. When I chaired public safety at that time when he was elected, I've always been noted for my support for law enforcement, and I always will. So that's, but that decision would be up to this committee.
No question there. I just got a couple more questions if I could. The speed limiter devices you mentioned, I'm a huge fan of, where it shows your speed and their speed. I think that's the single greatest thing we can do to slow down traffic. Again, getting back to, I think, what we talked about, which is the goal is to keep the kids safe and slow cars down. It's interesting. I've actually had some conversations with the camera companies about it, and some of you in the audience will know this conversation well. They said, oh, no, we don't like those. I said, why is that? Well, people slow down and we don't ticket them. I said, exactly. So I think that's an excellent part of any piece of legislation. In fact, I'd encourage any school system to put them in no matter what they're going to do. But it really then goes down to the fee structure. If we're going to fine someone for doing something wrong, I don't like that people get an incentive to fine people more. I like it if you want to put something in and for some reason needs to maintain the law of the land, which I'll tell you right now, I'm okay with Representative Washburn's bill as well. Let me be real clear on that. But if we do keep these things, I think it's important that there's a flat fee that a company is paid to put them in, and that's all they get paid. Doesn't matter how long they run, how many tickets they cite or they don't cite. It should be a single amount like we do every other contract in any other government agency. This should be no different where it's a pay-to-play type model. Would you agree of putting something in there that would be just a flat fee period?
I'm at the will of this committee. We have left half the monetary penalties at local government for their use to pay camera companies for whatever. As I said a while ago, I understood that after talking to a lot of these jurisdictions and such, some of them contract with camera companies under a subscription. Some of them do it as a flat fee. Now, I don't know what their profit margin is. I don't know what their investment is. I would suspect in this particular case that these camera companies would be the ones who would have to put up the flashing signs. I don't have a clue what those things cost. This is just a, as you can see, this is just a general bill to try to hem this situation up. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that we need to remember one thing about why this bill was originally passed, and it was to slow people down in school zones. I mean, bottom line, it was passed 7 years ago as a tool, and it's been quite an effective tool, but it's been an effective tool as raising revenues, and that's not the purpose. We're not up here to do the gotcha bills. We're up here to do what's right, and this is the product of that.
I agree. Thank you.
Any other committee members? Senator Bearden?
Chairman Powell, good to see you this morning.
Always, my friend.
I do want to say on page 10, lines 247, I appreciate you put other purposes may include mental health support services. I think that's something that we need to address in our school system, help our counselors any way we can. If that's something that the cities decide that's what they need to do, then that's where it needs to go, and I appreciate you putting that in there. Going on to Chairman Albert's point, I also agree with you. I think there should be pay for the equipment, but this shouldn't be an ongoing. We're all about capitalism. Appreciate people making a profit. They got to. But you're right. There needs to be something in there to safeguard, to make sure it's not just about money revenue. This is about slowing people down. And again, I had a other language which you put in there on the 1 hour prior to start and 1 hour after. Those are the guardrails that we have to have in place. These things running all day, or there's a baseball game, it's an activity, and those things are running. I think you did a great job with the bill, and I appreciate you putting the guardrails in there. So it really wasn't a question. It was more of a comment to the author and all the work that he's done, and I've known Chairman Powell for many years, and he's done a lot of great work for this state, and I appreciate everything you've done.
Thank you for those comments.
And
If it wasn't so early in the morning, I'd blush.
I'm glad it's early.
And I think in the House that would be considered a question. Real quick, and while I again to the author of the bill, I appreciate the work you did, and you and I have had many discussions about a lot of pieces of legislation, and I hear a lot of times that the intent is the guardrail thing, and I greatly appreciate that. So just for the point of conversation, understanding, because I think you're right about this bill is going to morph into something that both sides, the House and the Senate, will sit down together and come up with something I think that's reasonable across the board. But 7 years ago, as you said, that legislation was passed establishing these things. And while I appreciate both senators that have spoken related to it, for the purpose of conversation, aren't we walking into local government's responsibilities? These contracts are signed between, and listen, I'll tell you, I've got one near a private school where a private school that's near the school where I take my daughter every morning, and I've also got one in the county I live in at a public school. And I see issues with placement and some other things where I think some motorists are at a disadvantage coming out of a roundabout. And I know with radar, there are rules that the Department of Public Safety regulate that you can't cite people for speeds based on inclines and declines and other things. But when it comes to the contracts, whether it's a 50-50 split, or whether it's like Senator Bearden said, you come in, you lease the equipment, I guess, or you buy the equipment, then pay a service contract to the company that you purchase it from. Shouldn't those decisions be made by city councilors and county commissioners as opposed to state senators and state reps?
Well, I certainly do agree, because that's the way the bill is written. if you take the $125 fine, straight fine, there's no surcharges or anything, my calculations is $67.50 would go to the local government. $67.50 would go to school safety programs and
Well,
such as this is written.
If they
Now-
negotiate that contract and DOT comes in and permits the placement, because they have the expertise and we have somebody here from DOT that's going to talk about exactly what that process is, and then the Department of Public Safety, which permits radar and patrol cars, and again, and as a side note, I'm very familiar with your dedication to law enforcement. I think the first time you and I met was at a Fraternal Order of Police event cookout that you hosted for several hundred law enforcement officers, and you're very kind to me the first time we ever met. But when the money comes in, and if they are violating it, just like they would radar detectors or anything else, the Department of Public Safety comes in, they conduct an investigation, they determine that one of the systems that are in one of the two of the counties that I have are violating. They're writing tickets at the wrong time, they're doing all this other stuff. The Department of Public Safety has the ability to suspend the operation of that equipment, just like they do. They stopped Waverly Hall from writing tickets on radar for a while because they had set up a speed trap. And I do believe what you said at the beginning, that some of these have morphed into modern day speed traps. And so giving the Department of Public Safety the jurisdiction that they have over the radar, understanding the responsibilities that the Department of Transportation has for putting these things in the right places for safety, because if you've not seen a motor vehicle that has crashed into something concreted in on the side of the road, you don't appreciate the impact the smallest collision can cause to an individual in a motor vehicle. And then leave it to the city or county to sign that contract. And by giving it to the city and county to sign the contract, we have to be comfortable, in my mind, letting them determine how the revenue is spent. Because a lot of times, we've all seen it, where we'll tell a local government, you have to spend this much on public safety. Well, what they do is they supplant current public safety funding with this new revenue. So the bottom line number does not go up. They're just moving money around, and being involved in a local government for 30 years, it happens a lot. But because of the fact that the school has no vested interest beyond safety, and I want to be clear, we've had 7 children struck in Muskogee County, and we have to slow the traffic down. But let the counties and the cities decide where the revenue goes. Let the counties and the cities decide what's in their contracts. And if the counties and the cities choose to violate the parameters which are established by the Department of Transportation or the Department of Public Safety, then we punish them up to taking the equipment away and them not being able to do it at all.
No,
Does
I
that
agree.
not seem like a fair?
I agree with you completely, and that's how this bill is written.
Okay.
Out of that fine that the city or the county, whoever's running these devices, they would get half the money.
Now, but what I'm saying is if they sign the contract, they get 100% of the money, and then if they choose to give some to the school district, or if they choose to build sidewalks in front of the schools, or if they choose other things beyond what's written in here, under a contract, isn't that what the citizens of that county have asked those county commissioners and city councilors to take responsibility for?
Senator, the way this is written, half of that money, half
Right.
of that citation would go to the school safety. The other half would be left up to the local jurisdiction, the PD department of the local governing authority, that they could decide. We're not telling them who or what company to use or whatever.
I agree.
As you know, in this situation, one of the jobs that the local PDs were supposed to do, and that's they were supposed to review these fines and the citations and the speed and on the camera and all. Well, I'm sure that most of them do. But, you know, we've heard all the stories about a car on the back of a trailer has been cited. We've heard all of these stories from one end to the other. So out of that half the revenue that the cities or the counties or whoever it may be, then they can contract with whoever they want to. Because these companies that I understand, that the PDs, they don't mail out the citations.
That's right.
They don't do any of the collections. They only have one responsibility, and that responsibility is to review the citation. And quite frankly, it appears in some jurisdictions there hasn't been a lot of review of citations. You know, when you see, I think that I heard the story yesterday that there was a 47-car funeral procession,
I got that same phone call.
and they got 47. They ticketed 47 vehicles in a funeral procession.
I
So,
think
you
it
know,
was 50, and they ticketed everyone but the 2 law enforcement vehicles that were
Yeah.
leading the
So-
procession.
So, I mean, it's what we can say.
Yes, sir.
I mean, we all know that money rules everything, especially in law enforcement, because there's never enough money for public safety. And I'm afraid that a lot of the jurisdictions have gotten used to this. And that's what the reason we've given them half, let them pay for the camera companies, whatever they want to do. But let the other half go to, and the only other option would be to cut the fines down to $70 if that's the will of this committee.
Yes, sir. And did you give any consideration to lowering the 35% that we currently allow communities to use in their budget from fines and fees based on law
If you'll
enforcement?
look in the bill,
Police action.
somewhere in this bill, we did that.
You lowered it to,
It's at 35%.
no, it is at
It
35%.
It was not prior to this. These
Right.
cameras being a civil citation and not a ticketing offense and
Right.
not radar. So we have placed the local jurisdictions under the 35% rule.
And what were they under prior to that?
Nothing.
Right. And so would you be comfortable if we lowered that even more?
Senator, I'm pretty comfortable right now.
Yeah.
I'm wide awake, and I've been awake since 4 o'clock. And, you know,
It feels good to be up this early, doesn't it?
no, sir, it doesn't. But, you know, normally, well, I will retract that. I'm usually up at this time, but
There you
I'm
go.
just now drinking coffee and smoking my first cigar of the day.
Yeah, just let me, what, are you on 4?
I was just going to point you to line 72 for the equal or greater than 35%.
What line was it?
Line 72, page 4.
Right, that was already in there. When I was
Yes.
talking about, I think last year when we looked at this, the committee you and I were on, we actually lowered it, I want to say to 25 or maybe 30.
I was thinking 30.
I think it was 30 on this, because the one thing I despise is revenue-based policing, 100%. I wish there were ways that counties had to wait 3 years before they could even start moving any money made 3 years prior into their budget, so that they wouldn't go out and encourage, and I'm gonna use a terrible word, it's not used in rooms around law enforcement agencies anymore, but quotas. And I promise you, quotas were not created by men wearing badges or ladies wearing badges or shoulder patches. They were created by politicians and county commissioners and city council members to try to find a way to make money off of a city department that in fact is not intended to make a profit, which is, to your point, is why it's so hard to get enough funding for public safety, because public safety usually does not generate the funds to support the operations. But any other questions to Chairman? As our guest on the committee, Senator Burns came and asked if he could participate, and I told him yes, since he had been so involved in the creation of that other piece of legislation. Chairman Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate Chairman Powell. And again, there's a lot of similarities between your approach and the approach that I took. 2 quick questions. One of the problems I've seen is citation notification, in the fact that I get a citation 2 weeks after my violation, and I might have picked up more than one citation at the time. Do you address in any way citation notification?
As a matter of fact, I did, I think, earlier, if I can
Yeah, that
look
was,
through the bill.
Right now, I believe it could be as much as 14 days between the time of the time of the violation and the time of the citation.
We did not, as far as the time to send out the citation. These citations are normally sent out, and I think as a human factor, because remember that the local law enforcement is supposed to review these snapshots that are taken. But there's a couple areas in here. One is that people get so much junk mail that they may not realize that they'd received that citation. That's the reason on line 120 we said that the envelope will display the name and the seal of the governing authority. And then the next is where we're saying that they have a right to appeal by going to call or go to the local court.
And that leads to the second question, which was due process, because at the end of the day, some individuals might suggest they were not in that area of the state at the time the citation was issued.
We live in a day, Senator, this new life that we live with all this technology that was supposed to make life so much easier has not made life that much simpler. What it's done, it's dulled people's senses. There's so many people are willing to, they get something in the mail, they just put it on the credit card, or they'll send a check without questioning anything because they don't want to be troubled to have to appear or to call the court or to contest something. You know, case in point. You know, I got a piece of mail the other day wanting to sell me a warranty to tell me that my warranty on my new car is no longer good. Well, when I bought that car back in October, it had a 50,000 mile, 5-year warranty. And I looked at it and I read it. Well, you know, some of us, even though I may be a grandfather to some folks, I'm still pretty cognizant of where my money goes. And I looked at it and I read it and I called my dealership. This is just another scam. So that's the reason that we look at these things, so to properly post notice to folks if they're getting this. Now, I don't know that we could put a time frame on it. We can, of course, we're the legislature, we can do about anything. But where you have the interaction between these local companies, they take the snapshots of the speeders, they send it, as I understand the process, to the local governments. The PD is supposed to be a police officer that's supposed to review that. And obviously, in some cases, maybe not so well in some cases. So there's a time frame. When does that officer have that chance? Well, then they remit it back, and I think under some of these contracts, I think the camera companies are the ones who actually send out the citation. I don't think the PDs do, but I think they do, and that's where the admin fee came in. So by doing away with admin and things like that, we're actually trimming this down.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the more clever parts of the legislation is adding the name and seal of the governing body, because I think that catches the attention of individuals. And I've had the opportunity to attend court in Columbus when several individuals went to court to contest these citations. And what I found not so unusual about it, but because it's as Chairman Powell says, human nature, those who contested it had the charges dismissed. Those who walk up and just plead guilty with an explanation or no contest, which is basically pleading guilty, they're not contesting it.
Yeah.
Those were adjudicated the fines that were on the paper they had gotten in the mail. The agency had in this case, it was a high-ranking deputy who went into the court and explained the times to the judge and the operation of the equipment, and they asked how many times the equipment was calibrated, and he answered those questions. And so my concern is, I think that was looking at that is due process. But my concern is we're looking at the number of citations that are given out. I think that day there were maybe 5 people, and this is a pretty crowded courtroom, 5 people who chose to go to court and actually contest it. And those who just said not guilty, and I know, Chairman Harbison's familiar with the courthouse I'm talking about, those who said not guilty and said it wasn't me, it wasn't during that time, was it this? For the most part, those cases were dismissed. I think the judge in this case was given a lot of latitude to those individuals who took the time to come to court, who took off work and took time to come to court to contest some of these. And I will say, there's been 2 of these in my house, of these citations, and we paid them. And the reason we paid them, is because the person who got them was driving more than 10 miles above the speed limit through a school zone. And it's the reality of it. But there has to be a better way of doing what we're doing. And I'll be honest with you, when I hear myself say that we are giving people 10 miles over the limit in a school zone, it makes my stomach turn over, because I know some people on this committee and people in this room have seen the damage to the human body after being hit by a motor vehicle. And I'll tell you, you don't want to say something is terrible and then 6 weeks later stand in front of parents or somebody else after their child's been ran over by a car. So we do have to find some kind of balance in here somewhere to make this thing work. But to both of these pieces of legislation, I think they make good points that in some areas, these things are out of control. Because I've reached out to every company, and every company has been responsive with the exception of one. And that one is probably one of the ones that we have the most complaints about. But we'll have that conversation. Are there any more questions for Chairman Powell?
No questions.
Yes, ma'am. What mic number is that, ma'am? You're hot.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
I get up early in the morning with you too. So I want to thank you for coming, but I do have a question. We talk about children and pedestrian safety, but some of that citation revenue, maybe it should go to local legislation in reference to fixing the designs of roadways and stuff like that. Have we ever considered that, giving some of that citation revenue to that?
Senator, quite frankly, we did not look at that. DOT has that control as it is. We just looked for a fix, something that would make it reestablish some faith in the public that these aren't just gotcha traps. That was the reason we put the 10-mile-an-hour variance. And quite honest, we did that for one reason, that we had a couple of situations in the code that we don't have that. So for the sake of uniformity for the motoring public, we have added that 10-mile-an-hour variance. Now, the will of this legislative body and the deliberative body, and that's to come to a conclusion. If there's some ideas that y'all have, whether it be Police Benevolent Association or whatever, but we'd certainly willing to look at any of it. I think it's all about reestablishing faith in the people in the state of Georgia.
And I appreciate you saying that, Chairman. That makes a lot of sense. Any other questions for Chairman Powell? All right, thank you, Chairman.
I want to thank you, and I want to commend this committee, since I've never been to a meeting, but y'all have this many people, and I have trouble getting a quorum in the middle of the day sometimes.
I'm telling you, Chairman, it's chicken biscuits. That's all it is. It's chicken biscuits.
And where's your office?
It's right there.
Let me get you a cup of coffee.
All right.
I don't guess you'd have a Bloody Mary in there, would you?
If you look at my cooler, there's not a Bloody Mary, but there may be something in the bottom.
Thank you,
Not
ladies and
mine.
gentlemen. I'll wait around in case you have any other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, and we're going to move now to House Bill 225, sponsored by Representative Washburn. Representative, if you'll step up and pick your mic.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Robinson, for inviting me to come to this hearing today to present this bill, and thank you, Chairman Albers, for making this available to me. I am here to present House Bill 225, and as you know by now, this bill proposes to reverse the law that was passed in 2018, and although I certainly would not argue that that bill was not well-intentioned. I believe it was well-intentioned, but I hope to present to you today the abuses that have occurred, I believe, because of that. My bill proposes to reverse that, and it proposes to ban school zone cameras in Georgia. Let me tell you, before I start telling you the process that brought me to this point, I should point out to you that I'm a grandfather. I have 6 grandchildren. today is my granddaughter Caroline's birthday. She's 7 years old today, and my wife and I will be calling her later to sing happy birthday to her, which we try to do. She lives down in Statesboro. She goes to public school. The point I'm making is obvious. Children's safety is very important, and I am certainly not insensitive to the need to control traffic speed in school zones. I do believe that there are ways that we can do it without these cameras. Let me tell you, and Chairman, I did what you encouraged me to do. I watched every one of the hearings with Senator Burns' bill, and it was informative, and I appreciate your encouragement for me to do that. One thing I heard,
Did we do a good job?
sir?
Did we do a good job?
You did an excellent job, very thorough.
I just want to point out that it would be greatly appreciated when important bills move to either side of this building, that we don't try to run 6 bills through in 30 minutes without taking times to drill down deep. It seems like to me a lot of times, little naming a peanut or some other nut or fish or tree seems to take precedence over things that impact the lives of Georgians each and every day, and we get wrapped around the axle on political BS as opposed to drilling down on that stuff. And so when Chairman Albers tasks us with subcommittee work, we take it serious, and I wish we could infect the entire General Assembly with that attitude so that maybe we only pass 70 bills a year,
Yes.
but they're very well vetted bills that actually impact Georgians' lives. So I appreciate your comments on that, and I hope we serve you well today, too.
Well, thank you. I'm confident you will, and in all sincerity, I was impressed with your approach to this and impressed with the opportunity to be here and how thorough you are being with this issue. This is a real problem in Georgia, as has been stated earlier, and I'll share some.
So will you help my bills over there when Chairman Powell tries to torpedo him because I made him get up at 4 a.m.
I
on
will
a
certainly
Wednesday?
be inspired to
All
help
right,
in any way
thank
that
you.
I
I
can.
appreciate that.
You know, one of the things, in all sincerity, I
Yes, sir.
appreciate your thorough approach. I'm so honored to be in the Georgia General Assembly. I've been here, I'm in my 7th year, and it's a great honor for me and a blessing to me to be here. And one of the things I love about being here is how we do approach legislation. Perhaps we need to be more thorough, as you're describing. But you know, we come from different areas of the state. We come from different backgrounds. We're different ages. We come from different communities. But we come together and we debate and discuss important issues for Georgians. And this process is a good process because we have debate and compromise, and we try to come to what is a good conclusion for Georgians in the process. And so I sincerely appreciate your approach, and frankly, been inspired by it to be more thorough myself on our side of the House when I'm tasked with chairing subcommittees and committee meetings. Let me tell you, I think this is important information to know the process for why I came to this decision to introduce a bill to ban these cameras. Bibb County, Macon Bibb County, which is a consolidated government, put these in, I don't know when, a couple of years ago, but a couple of years ago I began to get complaints from constituents. And interestingly, the first complaint I got was not from a Bibb County, but from one of the other counties I represent, and he called to complain about these cameras and these tickets he was getting. Frankly, I thought he was just mad because he'd gotten a ticket. And in fact, he and I got into a pretty tense conversation about it at one point, in which, you know, we got into a pretty tense conversation, frankly. But the complaints continued. And then there's a weekly newspaper in Middle Georgia called the Monroe County Macon Reporter, and they did some investigative work. And in that, they revealed that as of November of last year, Macon-Bibb County had taken in $6.5 million in fines, which really got my attention. And also, I was continuing to get complaints, and more complaints, both from Bibb Countyans and from folks in surrounding counties. So the complaints continued, but the reporting that they did really got my attention. And so I decided, after hearing a lot of complaints from a lot of people, and those complaints were the complaints we all are hearing, I got a ticket that was not during school zone hours. This ticket came here, it came there. There was just all sorts of complaints. So I decided that I would introduce a bill to reverse the legislation and to ban these cameras. And I was doing it mostly because of my constituents there in Bibb County. Well, at that time, I was contacted by Fox 5 News, who wanted to interview me about that. And I also was contacted by WANF, who has also done a lot of investigative work. And in one of those stories, they revealed, and this is documented, no one has challenged this, and I'm assuming it is accurate, that these cameras in early 23, in the spring of 23, had collected $112 million from Georgians, people across the state. What's the point I'm making? This is not a Bibb County issue. It is a statewide issue, and we hear a lot of comments about what happens in Tallulah Falls, for instance. That's a very common complaint that we hear about. So I began to think about that more from a statewide issue. Also, when I did the interview with Fox 5, they wanted to interview me about the idea of introducing this bill. I began to hear from people all over the state. I began to get emails. I began to get phone calls from people all over the state saying, thank you. Thank you for introducing this. Thank you for doing this. So there's no question that we do have a problem across the state, and I think we recognize that. When I introduced my bill, I got 100 co-signers, and I did not have to work hard to get them. I could have gotten more, but I wanted to get the bill dropped. 100 co-signers. I think there actually ended up being a couple more than 100. But I did not have to work hard to get those, because when I would say to a state rep, would you like to sign a bill banning these schools on cameras? Yeah, I'll sign it. Where do I sign? So my point is that when you get 100 co-signers on a bill easily, and by the way, it was bipartisan. I think it had 53 Republicans, 47 Democrats. When you have that many co-signers on a bill, what's my point? My point is that people are hearing from their constituents, and they are outraged by some of the abuses that are going on here. Now, we also did some polling around in Bibb County and outside of Bibb County. And it was Facebook polling, showed a photo of the schools on camera and said, how do you feel about them? Do you think they're effective? And that polling came back. In fact, I can send that to you. I meant to do that. I don't think I did. That polling came back that over 70% of the respondents say they're not effective and they need to be banned. And so, again, the point is the concerns about these cameras and about the abuses is real, it is broad, it comes from different areas of the state.
Representative Washington, I can interrupt you real quick. When you're
Yes,
talking about Facebook polling, is this a question you put out on your personal
Yes, it's
page
on my,
asking this?
Yeah, yes, it was.
Okay,
It was.
and so the not effective now, and I think you heard we had some companies saying that their number of citations dropped 70 to 90% the second year that they were up.
Yes.
Would that not be effective? Would that not be a description of effective?
Well, I agree it would, Mr. Chairman. I think my point about the polling was just that with that much evidence of people being, I do not believe that most Georgians are insensitive to children's safety and that they go speeding through school zones when the lights are flashing. I just don't believe that. Surely there's some bad actors somewhere sometime, but a lot of people are being ticketed, and we'll get to some of the things that are done outside of that. My reason for mentioning that was just that there has to be a problem when there's that kind of response.
Right.
And yes, I want to be clear, this was on my Washburn for State House campaign.
Right.
It's just on my Facebook page there. But it was the most effective way that I could find to do
I think
some
it's reasonable.
polling.
Reasonable,
Yeah.
yes, sir.
And by the way, I think we had something like 3,000 responses, so it was very well responded. The response was very good. Now, I would like to talk about this a little bit because when I watched your videos of your committee hearing on Senator Burns's bill, it jumped out at me toward the end that you said you detest revenue-based policing. And I
Right.
heard you say it again this morning, which
Yes,
I
sir.
was delighted to hear.
Absolutely.
Let me tell you the perception I have about this. This is, I believe, a brilliant business scheme, and I've been told this by a number of people. In fact, I believe he is here today. I have a sheriff here today that I think will testify to this effect. It's my understanding that the camera companies come in to a local government, whether it's a sheriff or in Bibb County, I think the local government engaged them. But they come in, and I believe this is correct. They say, okay, we'll put the cameras in at no cost to you. We will operate the cameras. We will take the photos of the license plates. We will issue the tickets. We'll handle the mailing. We'll handle collecting the fines. We'll take our part, and then we'll send you yours. And I believe that is the model. And no one's told me differently about that. So, I believe that when you look at those kind of numbers, that $112 million, we can all probably assume that is well over $200 million now. And if we use a conservative estimate of what the camera companies are taking, and I think they are taking from 25% to maybe 35%, using the conservative estimate of 25%, that means if it's above $200 million now, the camera companies have taken $50 million out of Georgians' pockets, in effect. $50 million. And so I think the argument is sound to say there's a real incentive for local governments here to say, well, gosh, this looks like pretty easy money. I think we ought to sign up for it. There's an example over in, I believe it's Burke County, south of Augusta. I heard from a county commission, a county manager over there. And they had collected on a single school, I believe it's on the state route bypass, that they had collected $500,000 in 7 months. The point is, there is incentive for local governments to use these cameras to rake in money. And I believe there are other ways to control traffic in school zones. Senator,
And I've heard you say that. Could you tell us what you think would be other, well, first of all, let me ask you, should anybody speed through a school zone?
No, sir, they should not. I mean,
If there's a deputy sheriff or a police officer sitting there, and I know in Bibb County it's the sheriff's office, consolidated government, should there be a deputy sitting there with a radar? And if he writes a citation for every speeder that goes through there, should he write the citation if they go 1 mile over the speed limit or 10 over the speed limit, or just should there be an arbitrary number, or should there be a solid number, or would we still have the same complaints if we had a deputy sitting there writing citations every day?
I don't believe you would have the same complaints.
And could you tell me why you don't think that?
I don't think that because often, let me give you a personal experience, because if we are assuming that all these tickets are being written during flashing light time periods, that is a wrong assumption.
Oh, no, I agree with you on that. I understand that. I'm just talking about the act of getting a citation. Does it matter if the citation, and let's say the technology is sound, does it matter if we get the citation from a piece of equipment or from a human being? And knowing that county commissioners and city councilors should be good stewards of tax dollars, if we can show that the thing about that piece of equipment, that we trust the technology, we're not having to pay workers' comp, we're not having to pay a full salary and retirement on, should that weigh in at all when we talk about citations being written in a school zone?
Back to question number one,
Yes, sir.
I think people don't react the same to a deputy or a policeman pulling them over and writing them a ticket.
Okay.
I think it is, to a large degree, they're getting, as Senator Burns mentioned, they're getting a ticket 2 weeks after the fact. Sometimes they don't even know they got it, and or they didn't. They suddenly get a ticket in the mail. I think it is more effective for an officer to pull somebody over and to write that ticket. Chairman Alberts mentioned the flashing light thing. I think that is very effective. It's effective on me. in Bibb County, not near school zones. We have some of those around, and it tends to make me slow down. So I do believe there are ways to do it other than using the cameras, but I appreciate your argument about.
Yeah, oh, no,
about the
well, it's, and please don't take it as an argument. It's just, when we make a declaration, I think it makes us understand our point if we're challenged,
Right.
if you will.
I understand.
On looking at the overall cost, because, personally, in my mind, I think we should have zero tolerance for someone that speeds through a school zone. I think that's the reason the speed limits are as low as they are in the mornings at 25. When I drive my daughter down Bradley Park Drive, and there's a crossing guard in front of one school that stops traffic, and then they have these cameras and stuff, and believe me, when I creep through there at 25, I realize how slow 25 really is.
And it is slow.
But it
You're
is,
right.
but it needs to be.
That's fine.
But,
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah, let me
I'm-
give you my.
One
I'm
second,
sorry.
please. Chairman Albers.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Washburn. Always great to see you. If your bill were to be passed, Governor signed the water appeal cameras, would this in any way prohibit a local jurisdiction from putting up one of those speed limiter devices we talked about earlier, saying your speed is this, and this is a speed limit, keeping the flashing yellow lights or yellow lights, whatever it is, and putting those in? Would it prohibit that at all?
No, sir, it would not. It just bans the cameras and the ticketing aspect of that.
And isn't it true that those cost somewhere between $1,000 and $3,000 are actually a pretty small investment in order to slow people down and get pretty good results?
I will trust the chairman's the price. I wouldn't know about that, but I would assume it is fairly inexpensive. And I might just stick in there, I'd be a huge supporter of us thinking of a way to fund that from the state if it helped that. But there are ways to do this other than impacting our citizens the way we're impacting them. Can I tell you my experience?
Yes, sir.
On that? I have a elementary school right around the corner from me. I have never been ticketed there because I crawl through there whether the lights are flashing or not. Okay? But I was going down Vineable Avenue in Macon, which is a thoroughfare. There's a school there. I was ticketed. There's 2 or 3 things about this, but it deserves to be told. I was driving a car that's in my wife's name. I was ticketed at 11:05 in the morning with no lights flashing. I almost threw it away because I thought it was junk mail. Caught my attention finally. I opened it, I read it, I looked at it, I turned it over on the back, and the car, my wife was ticketed. She was not driving, it was me driving. The recourse there that's described, she would have to get a notarized statement and send it by certified mail, return receipt requested, to be able to contest that she wasn't driving. But here's the main thing. The light's not flashing. And so you see the light not flashing. I was not running 70 miles an hour. I was running 42 miles an hour. 42 miles an hour on a thoroughfare. The speed limit with no lights flashing is 30 miles an hour, which is surprisingly low there on that thoroughfare. So I was ticketed. I'm guilty. I was running 42 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone. I looked at it, thought about going to do all the stuff to contest it about my wife not driving. But the facts of these, I was speeding. Now, I wasn't speeding at 80 miles an hour in a school zone with a bunch of children walking on the sidewalk. I wasn't putting kids in danger, but I was running 42 miles an hour, so I paid the ticket. That is where all this revenue is coming from, in my opinion. It is not coming from people speeding through school zones with lights flashing. And the point is, our people are being victimized, and they're being ticketed when they are not people speeding through school zones at 80 miles an hour. They are people who are running 42 miles an hour. Now, here's another issue about that for me. I'm blessed. I'm not a wealthy man, but I can afford to pay that $100 ticket, and I paid it. But I will tell you, there's a lot of folks out there being ticketed in Georgia. There's a lot of Waffle House waitresses and cleaning folks and construction workers and school teachers and other things who paying a $100 fine is hard. And it might be taking food off their children's table, truthfully. So this situation of writing tickets like that, the way they're being written in Georgia, to Georgians all the time, is victimizing Georgians. It's victimizing a lot of people who don't have the money to pay. And that is one of the reasons I became so passionate about this. This is revenue-based policing. It is walking into a local government. And I told my good friend Jim Thornton one day with GMA, we had a 30-minute conversation on the way home from, Donna and I were driving home. And we talked along, and Jim's a friend, and of course we agree sometimes, we disagree sometimes, but he said, you know, I'm just calling to let you know I'm gonna have to be against you on your bill. And I said, well, I understand, and we talked for a while. At the end of the conversation, I said this to him. I said, Jim, I do want to say this to you. I said, it bothers me that our local governments will take that money and be glad to get it and be totally insensitive to the fact that a lot of that's being taken out of the pockets of poor people in Georgia who can't afford to pay it. And these are people who are not speeding through a school zone at a 70, 80 miles an hour. They're running 42 in a 30-mile-an-hour zone. So, Mr. Chairman, that is why I became so passionate about this. Now, let me go ahead and ask the question that probably is coming. A lot of times I get the question, well, why, let's don't end it, let's mend it. Let's try to mend it. And my good friend Chairman Powell has brought a bill to try to do that. Senator Burns brought an excellent bill. I read them both, and yes, they have good proposals. But I will tell you that we have a problem with lack of recourse by our citizens. And you mentioned a minute ago being in a courtroom where they came in, many of them were dismissed. But a lot of our working folks in Georgia have a hard time taking a day off to go to court. I will tell you, one of the things I hear many, many times is I called the city, they told me to call the camera company. I called the camera company, they told me to call the city. And I believe that if we do not end it, if we do not ban these cameras in Georgia and go to some alternate way of controlling traffic speed, nothing's more important than our kids' safety, nothing more important than slowing down traffic if that's a problem. But there are different ways to do it other than these cameras, and I believe...
So Representative, to challenge you one more, give me an
Yes.
example of another way to slow down traffic in school zones.
I frankly think if you let the lights flash, I think the lights flashing slow people down.
So the way it's going now. I mean, let's take that, most school districts do not have these cameras.
Yeah.
So those school districts you think aren't having speeders through there, do you think the flashing lights are slowing them down?
I believe the flashing lights are very effective, and in fact, the flashing lights, I think, get people's attention. And I do think, as Chairman Albers has pointed out, these lights that flash saying you are running this speed, rate of speed, slow people down
Right.
considerably.
So you think it would be a better investment for the county or the city to go out and buy these signs that say,
Yes.
we're doing this?
Yes, I do. And here's the point about it.
And where does that money come from? Well, does that money come from public safety, or does it come from public works?
You mean to buy cameras?
Yeah,
To
well,
buy
no,
those-
sir, to buy those
buy-
signs and things like that.
Well, I just believe there are effective ways to slow down the traffic.
Okay.
Here's the sort of point I'd like to make about this. I was invited to come over to Decatur, and I also watched with interest, I believe, Conyers and Hamilton operate the cameras. And as far and I know what I observed in Decatur. I had a conversation with their mayor, with their city manager, with their chief of police, and they do have lots of kids on the sidewalks over there. And I do not believe they're abusing the system. But here's the problem. I don't think it is correct for us to allow Georgians across the state to be fined $200 million in a fairly short period of time in order to let 2 or 3 communities who are doing it right do it right. I believe the evidence is very strong that this whole thing is revenue-based policing.
Well,
We
so
need to end.
Decatur, and I appreciate you looking at Decatur because they came and testified, and I think Conyers did, as did Hamilton. And so you feel Decatur's doing it correctly?
As near as I could tell, they're doing an excellent job
Yes, sir.
with it. Yeah.
So, but you would oppose using that Decatur model in other cities because your bill would eliminate what Decatur's doing. Even though you agree that Decatur is using the system as you would think it was intended to be used, not manipulated, not like you said, the hours. You wouldn't have got a citation at 11:05
Yeah.
in Decatur.
No, I was impressed with Decatur and how they're doing it, and I did not, I heard the testimony when I watched from Conyers and Hamilton. My point about that is I am not suggesting that every community is abusing the cameras the way I believe a lot of them are. I do think that I'm not sure that we can argue effectively that having these cameras and ticketing people the way they are is the only way to accomplish slowing down the school traffic. And so that is probably where people of goodwill can disagree. Let me, I certainly will yield for questions at any time.
Yes, sir. And what we're going to do is, as soon as you, and I think the committee members that have any question about your legislation, I think your legislation is very straightforward.
Yeah.
Eliminate the cameras. And I think if we can let the committee members ask some questions, and I know we have some people here, subject matter experts on the technology. I think we have, you said you invited a sheriff to come and speak, and so we're going to give everybody an opportunity to come up and give their piece. And there was a sign-up sheet if anybody was not aware of it. William has picked it up, and if anybody did not have a chance to sign up, we'll give you that opportunity. But we do want to hear from the experts. But what I'm hearing you say is right now that elimination is the only option that you see, as opposed to Chairman Powell's bill or Chairman Burns's bill, which is, I think you said, mending the situation as opposed to ending the use of the cameras.
The reason I believe that is I think that the lack of recourse for our citizens to be able to go and appeal to somebody is not there.
But if due process is added into that where it's clear, and I know in Representative Powell's, he talked about the city logo that comes from the government, and if it's put in there and you handle it the same way you would if you got a parking ticket, because if you get a parking ticket, there's not the individual that wrote it's not standing there at your car waiting for you to challenge them. You have to take the parking citation, go to court, and challenge the citation.
My concern is that if the abuses, I believe the evidence is clear, there are
Right.
abuses. And if those abuses continue, I'm concerned that our people just still have no way of doing anything about that. And I understand your due process point.
And the abuses, if it were handled by the Georgia Department of Public Safety, the same way they handled the abuse of radars and speed traps, have they done in Waverly Hall and Casita and other cities, where they came in and taken away their ability because law enforcement agencies don't get to go out there and just run radar willy-nilly. They have to be certified, and the Department of Public Safety has jurisdiction over their permitting of running those radars. And so if there's complaints, they can take it away. If something like that is put in there, and what I'm trying to do is, Chairman Powell talked about compromise and trying to work back and forth. And so, I'm just...
Would you, could I make this appeal? And this may be unusual. Would the committee consider putting both of these bills on the floor of the Senate and letting the Senate speak on this?
What this committee will do is this committee will make a recommendation
I understand
to the
the
full
recommend-
Public Safety Committee, and that would be entirely up to the chair, and then, of course, the rules process and everything else has to go forward.
I understand, and I understand that, certainly.
But the best way, in my mind, is that we make a recommendation to what we think is the best piece of legislation moving forward, which, I think you said you read Chairman Burns's legislation, And what Chairman Burns did, and I know he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but Chairman Burns went out there and found the two best pieces of legislation, I think, from last year, and pulled what he felt was the most important parts of each one and combined them together. And so there's a real opportunity that this committee or the Public Safety Committee, full Public Safety Committee, might want to do the same thing with these two, find the best parts of each bill.
My concern is if the abuses continue, if the citizen has any way to really do anything about it other than complain, as this case is right now.
And I think the committee, and I can't speak for the chairman of the committee, even though he's sitting to my right, he's a very analytical and intelligent man, and I think that is the paramount elephant in the room right now, is that citizens don't feel they have due process. Even more so, the time and due process, I think, are the two primary issues that are coming up around these things.
Time and also notification. I think
Right.
people are.
Well, and I think that has to be the part of the due process, that a timely notification, because I appreciate what you said about if the deputy writes the citation, then they get the citation right there. But what we can't do logistically is you can't put in Bibb County, I'm not sure how many schools you have. I know in Columbus we've got, I think we're up around 60 total school zones, or 60 total schools. We've got more school zones than that. But we don't have the manpower to put law enforcement officers in every school zone in the morning and in the afternoon.
Yes, sir.
You just can't do it. But I think there's the opportunity for a compromise. And you know what? The full committee may say, Representative Washburn's is the absolute best way to do it, and it go forward. But that's up to that committee and that chair, who I think has great sympathy toward what you're trying to do.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Let me clarify. When I said notification, I was thinking more of the lights flashing to say, beware, you're entering, a school zone. I think those are effective.
Is school zones the only place we need to be concerned about speeding?
Well, no, sir. Certainly, people running high rates of speed. And
Should we have flashing signs?
We're much safer when we drive slower.
You and you come from Middle Georgia, and I come from West Georgia to come up here. Of course, please understand, I drive like an 80-year-old lady going to church on Sunday. I get in the right-hand lane, set my speedometer at around 65, turn on my podcasts, and have people blow the horn at me as they pass me. And I'm very comfortable with that, because one of my goals in life is to aggravate as many people as possible. But or it seems to be. But should we have those on the interstate to slow people down? Those flashing signs that say your speed is 90 instead of 70, and get people to slow down there? Because I think the number of automobile deaths related to crashes in Georgia continue to rise every year. They have the last 3 years. So do we inundate our roadways and city streets and everything with signage everywhere?
I will say those are effective for me when I see them in Bibb County, sometimes not near a school zone. Speaking of that, and I'm sorry, I'm not being emotionally overcome by the subject matter. My eyes are watering because of my allergies.
I thought I'd pulled a heartstring.
Yeah, you really touched me.
I thought I found one. I did it again.
I'll have to tell you this story before we go. I was headed into the school zone right around the corner from my house, and I always go to a crawl, because I'm not sure when they're gonna write a ticket, whether the lights are flashing or not. And people are really right on my bumper all the time when I'm crawling through there. And one passed me on the right just the other evening, because I was just going so slow. So I think it is, the flashing lights to notification is effective. And I want to thank you for your thorough treatment of this. I want to thank you all for hearing me today, and I'll be glad to entertain any questions unless you're done.
Chairman Albers.
Yeah.
Thank you again for your thoughtfulness and your presentation. I think Chairman Robertson brought up a good point about the interstates. Clearly, we have the majority of our traffic injuries and fatalities on our interstates and our highways, et cetera. I have seen, though, and I'll give kudos to our Department of Public Safety as well as Department of Transportation. There are signs now out there all over, whether they be fixed or the illuminated ones that are saying slow down, You know, it's everything from slowing your speed down to checking to make sure you have your safety belt on to all the other things that I think that are there. And I think awareness is important. I think technology is too, and that's something I don't think we've talked about inside of cars today. Most new cars will actually pop up and tell you, hey, the speed limit's changing, there is a camera, there is a school zone, there is a accident coming up, there's a something coming up. And I believe as those cars continue to become more prevalent on the road and the technology's there, they in themselves will become a safer way for people to operate a vehicle. Whether they're driving them, they're partially driving themselves, or candidly, before we know it, we're not going to have the steering wheel and none of this will matter anyway. So do you believe that technology in itself within an automobile may be part of the solution of slowing people down no matter where they are?
Yes, sir. I think that's a very good point, and I would certainly agree with that. Technology is a great thing. Again, you know, in this situation, I believe what we're dealing with is revenue-driven, and there's some abuses that are occurring because of that. And so, but I do agree.
Well, Chairman, I appreciate you got, what mic is that?
Number 8.
8? Yes, ma'am, you're hot.
Thank you for being here this morning. I do have a question. So I know you did a lot of extensive analysis, but I have a question. How much money do you think that eliminating the cameras would we save, would the state of Georgia save by eliminating the cameras?
Well, I don't think the state of Georgia currently is receiving any money from the cameras. It's all going to local government, so it's not a matter of state money. In fact, what we've suggested here today is that possibly we should look at some state funding to help with some methods that would slow traffic down rather than these cameras and the tickets. So the state is not getting any money out of them currently. Money's going to local governments. I think we should point out that this is not going to school systems often. In fact, in Bibb County, I called the school board. They never asked for the cameras, and they ended up having to push to get some of the money, and they had gotten a small amount of it, but most of it's going into the local government. It's being used there. So I think we shouldn't assume that school systems are getting the money and that it's directly about school safety.
I think in the state right now, there are several school systems that have contracts with some of these vendors, and then there are a vast majority of them, I think, are municipalities and county government. Well,
Yes.
I think most are municipalities. There's few county governments that I'm aware of right now.
That is correct.
That have those.
Yeah, that is correct.
All right, so Chairman, if you want to sit around for a few minutes,
Yes,
we're going to get some folks to come up here. I would like to ask, I know we have a couple of technicians that are familiar with this equipment. I think they may be with Blue Line. If they will, if we could get you to come up, and you're welcome to stay there, Representative, if you want to. If you'll take mics 1 and 2 here, the 2 in front of, yeah, exactly. And I do want to say this, though. I think this is the first time, you and I have been together about 7 years now, and this is the first time we've had this opportunity to engage like this in a subcommittee hearing, and I really appreciate you coming up here this morning and being as open and forthright as you are. It means a lot.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, if you would you identify yourselves and who you work with?
Yeah, I'm Scott Patterson with Dragon Eye Technology in Norcross, Georgia. We actually manufacture the hardware. We have laser-based camera systems that are used in Georgia and other states. We work with the camera companies. We actually don't contract directly with the cities. Blue Line is one of the companies that we actually work with.
What I'd like, I heard somebody say something a while ago that they'll check the speed on a trailer pulling a car, and I've heard several other things, and I actually spoke to the funeral director that had the procession. And so can you give us a little idea about the technology, the basics of the technology, how it works, and how it is, I guess, made to avoid some of these false positives?
There's essentially 2 types of speed measurement technologies. There's laser, which is the kind my company makes, and there's an advanced radar that's out there now. It's very similar to what's on the front of your cars for collision avoidance. It's not like exactly like the old handheld radar the police would use. Both of those technologies can isolate vehicles that are traveling at a certain speed or over a speed, and can tell you which lane those devices or those vehicles are in. And if that speed exceeds a certain threshold speed, which is pre-programmed in there, which all of our systems are always set to 11 miles an hour over whatever the limit is. If the lights are blinking, it knows that speed at that point in time, and it'll be 11 miles over that. So if it's 25, it'll be 36. If it's 45 after the lights are blinking and it's still active according to the legislation, it'll be 56. So that threshold speed is exceeded, then the software will trip a camera and video, take those pictures and that video, and put them together in a package and send it along to our prime contractor, in this case, Blue Line Solutions or some of the other vendors that are here. So it is measuring the vehicle that's going through there. It's not impossible to get what you're saying, have a trailer on the back, but it's measuring the moving vehicle. When that citation is reviewed, it should be the vehicle that's hauling the vehicle, right, and not the vehicle that's being towed, or that citation should be thrown out. So there's no artificial intelligence at this point to detect whether that vehicle is being towed in that example. But
if a trailer with a vehicle strapped to it is traveling 70 miles an hour, then there's a good chance the vehicle towing it is traveling at least 70 miles an hour. Is that not true?
That's exactly true. So if you've got one where it's being carried on a flatbed, you can get the license
Right.
plate of the vehicle that's carrying it. If it's being towed, then that needs to be reviewed by a human at one of the stages of review, and that should be, excluded if you can't see the license plate of the actual vehicle that's traveling,
Okay.
pulling it.
And so how accurate is this technology?
Well, we can speak for our system.
That's exactly what I want you to
It's
speak
the
to.
laser system. These systems are designed to be advertised to be plus or minus 1 mile an hour, thus the 11 miles an hour that we set as our threshold speed over that. Internally, we design that so we will not put a speed up, not catch a picture, unless we are 1/4 mile an hour, not to get too technical, to one standard deviation. And if you go through the technology and you have no statistics, that gives us 4 sigma to get to 1 mile an hour, 4 times 0.25 miles an hour. That makes our confidence in that measurement extremely high, like 99.9% that we're measuring an accurate speed. And then in our system, we train a laser on each lane. So they're very similar. They're an advanced version of handheld lasers, which we also make for police. So we have a laser and a camera that are tied together, trained on each lane, and as that vehicle drives through there, it'll measure that vehicle 600 times per second. It puts a circle so you know exactly which vehicle is being measured and exactly where the laser hits you on the back of the car to do the measurement. So you get to see that too in the picture. So we get that 1/4 mile an hour, and we get that camera isolation by having that laser pointed right at that vehicle, so we can identify who we actually measure.
So if you're on a 4-lane going in front of a school, is that 4 cameras and 4 lasers?
Yeah, on our laser systems, like for example, we have some on Pleasant Hill in Norcross. There are 3 lanes, and there are 3 cameras, 3 machine vision cameras, and 3 lasers, and they're tied together in a rigid box. So that laser and that camera are pointed the same direction in each lane. And those are checked on a daily basis as quality control.
And what is checked?
We check to make sure that that camera is pointing in the right direction to measure that lane. You have people cutting grass. Sometimes they bump into poles. The beauty of the laser system, if it gets bumped and it measures somewhere else, you're still measuring the speed of the car. So even that's supposed to be lane 2 and it got bumped over and hits lane 3, just if you used the laser before, you're measuring the speed of that vehicle. So no matter where it gets bumped, you're still, and you get a speed reading, that's the vehicle you're measuring. It'll show that circle right on the back of the car. But these, we check them every day to make sure they're operating and to make sure they're properly aligned in the lane that they're targeting.
What about the calibration of the laser? How often is that done?
Every morning, at least once a day, we run a internal test on that calibration. The system shuts down at midnight, and it powers up and it runs a self-test. Again, if anyone in here has law enforcement experience and you have a handheld laser, those systems will run a self-test every time you power it up. So that runs through a series of software and electrical tests to make sure the timing and the measurement properties are correct. And then once a year, those systems, we travel to the sites and we actually certify that with a simulator, which can be placed in front of the system, shuts it down, and placed in front of the system, and it has to produce a known speed within plus or minus 1 mile an hour.
And if there's a failure of calibration, does the equipment shut itself
It
down?
shuts completely down. So if that happens in the morning and it fails that self-test, it will send an email back to our facility, and that camera is down until that can be looked at by a technician and somebody travel to the site.
And if it falls below the 99.9
Exactly.
quality
yeah.
control test, then it's not operating?
That's a good point. When you drive through in a vehicle, there's a lot of traffic on the road, there's things blowing around. We'll get a reading on a car and we'll get a speed on that vehicle. But that's exactly, every time the final check that's done is what is your confidence in that reading? So I'm looking for a 1/4 mile an hour, or I won't put the speed up. So if that comes in and we measure that speed to 0.5 miles an hour, we think you're doing 60, but it's plus or minus 0.5, one standard deviation, no picture is taken, no camera, no speed is displayed, and no camera shot is taken.
Okay. Chairman?
On the citation, when the tickets are sent out, using the laser, you got the speed and distance. Is the distance also on the citation to show what the distance was measured at the time of the speed?
We do provide that, right, so you know exactly where that zone
So
is.
that is
and
on the
give you a
citation?
reference. I'd have to defer to the camera companies. We provide that information. It can be displayed on there. I think in most cases it is.
We provide the measurement distance during the review process. And better. My name is Zach Watts, by the way. I'm CTO for Blue Line Solutions. I'm responsible for developing the back office management software of the citations, the content management and violation management. As Scott said, and I can actually address the question about the vehicle being towed as well. I can't speak for other companies in the industry, but at Blue Line, we have a 3-phase human-in-the-loop review process. Basically, what that means is there are 3 human beings that look at every citation before it's sent out the door. 2 of them are Blue Line employees. We're the ones that are doing quality control checks. We're ensuring that, in this instance, if a vehicle that's cited is being towed, we would reject that. This is different from, say, using a discipline of computer vision to do plate recognition and send these things out automatically without having been looked at. And then, of course, the final review is the certified police officer. And the reason that Blue Line goes to such great lengths with 2 people checking it before we send it to the police officer is because we know that the police officer is limited on time. And we want to make sure that they're only getting high quality, basically pre-certified citations. As far as the data that's on the citation, we provide all the location data. We provide measurement data. I believe in the the agency review process, the distance is a part of the metadata that's available to the violator when they go log in to make the payment. They can review all the same information that the police officer saw when they reviewed. They also are shown a Google map of where it occurred so that they can actually interact with that map, and in most cases they're able to drop in and actually see where the camera is. That's a common question that we get. I didn't even realize there was a camera there. All of that information is generated from the device in the field, so it's not fabricated after the fact. And as Scott said, if there's any internal issues with the device on any particular day, it'll shut off. As well, with the certification aspect of it, we go to great lengths and at great cost to Blue Line to make sure that we are totally above board. So in this case, we record those certifications into the camera management aspect of our system. And if that certification date expires without being renewed, then the system itself will not allow for any citations to be imported from that device.
Now, in your role at Blue Line, what equipment do y'all purchase and put on the side of the road?
Great question, because I've heard a lot about the radar feedback signs. That is by default what Blue Line does at every location, at cost to Blue Line. The agency.
Explain exactly what radar feedback
Yes.
sign is.
So the feedback sign is the blinking sign that says speed limit, and then it will display the driver's speed. So we actually do 2 signs before every photo speed device. That is a standard placard that says you're entering a school zone. This is the monitored speed and times of day. Then there is the driver feedback sign, so the driver can actually see what speed they're going, and then they will get into range gate for the photo speed device.
Okay, this is the first time I've heard this. So on every, well, how many municipalities or counties do y'all have contracts with in Georgia, Blue Line?
I don't know that number off the top of my
Okay.
head.
So everyone you have a contract with, you provide this type of signage
Yep.
with the camera?
Yes, sir. If we don't have them all up now, it is a new policy at Blue Line that we do it.
Okay.
And so we are retroactively adding those back as well.
Okay, yes. Chairman Albers.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your presentation today. Let's drill down on that just a little bit. You said that's a new policy.
Yes, sir.
Do you by chance know how many cameras you currently have in the state of Georgia?
We probably have, it'll be an estimate, it's somewhere between, probably somewhere around 150
Okay.
located.
Out of
for
those
different vendors.
150, which are on the new policy, and when was the new policy developed and implemented versus the old policy?
Our policy is a few years old. I unfortunately can't speak to exactly how many of the radar feedback signs we have up, but it's been in effect for a while. My company,
What is a while?
several years.
Okay. Well, all 150 of your cameras Blue Line cameras?
No, we
Oh.
work with other vendors as well.
Okay.
Right, and most of them, I'm trying to remember, right, our guys travel, we don't actually put in the ancillary equipment like those Your Speed Is sign. But almost all of those that we have cameras in, I've seen that sign. You see a sign said photo forced ahead, this is your speed. Then you get the school zone lights if they're on at that point in time. And then, and only then, do you get the speed camera after that. So I think by far most of them are. I'm a big fan of that. I think that should be used. If I could make a quick comment on the speed, your sign, Your Speed Is. I've been working with law enforcement for about 30 years now on the handheld radars and lidars for us. The Your Speed trailers, I think it's pretty well known that they work when you first put them out there. But if there's no teeth behind them, we've worked with officers in neighborhoods. In about a week, those signs are not effective on their own in slowing people down. That's the anecdotal evidence that we hear from law enforcement, that they'll work for a little bit, but if there's no teeth behind it, some of the young kids will start seeing how fast they can go and what kind of number they can generate on those signs. So there's a limit to how far those alone will take you.
Well, and I appreciate that. I prefer real evidence, not anecdotal evidence, just for the record. But I want to
Understand.
get back to what we started here. I have never seen anywhere in Georgia what you're saying, ever. I have never seen going up to a school zone, lights flashing, here's your speed, here's the speed limit, and it's getting ready to hit a speed zone, and then a camera system put in place. So I'm not saying what you're telling us today isn't factual. I just have zero evidence to support that.
Right.
And it does seem to be a little odd we hear about this now. I'm just going to be perfectly candid with you. The goal of these committee meetings is to have very honest conversations,
Right.
make sure we're all singing from the same hymnal. But it sounds like to me that your company, or maybe your companies, I want to hear you say this, would support that prior to getting to a school zone, that exact process would be in place, whether it be flashing lights. It would say, here's your speed, here's a school zone speed, and it starts right now in order to slow people down. That both of your companies would support that. Is that accurate?
Blue Line would absolutely support that, because we believe that this is a genuine way to reduce those bad actors of driving. And I appreciate the representative's comments about Decatur, because that's one of our agencies as well. And
What's one of your agencies?
Decatur.
Oh, okay.
And so when we are looking at this program, we are genuinely thinking of everything we possibly can, so that if we send a ticket out the door, that the person receiving that should feel should trust the process, and that they are not being given a citation that's illegal or out of time or anything like that. But yes, we would definitely support that because we're already doing it.
And that's very good to hear. Some of the other counterparts have disagreed with you, so I'm certainly glad to hear you saying that.
Right.
Thank you.
We would certainly agree as Dragon Eye as well.
Yeah, and what I want to, the flashing sign with the speed on it, that's on the same pole as the sign that says you're entering a school zone or speed cameras ahead, something like that?
No, sir, they're typically on two separate poles. So there's the placard sign, then there is the radar feedback sign, and then there's then there's the school zone beacon itself, which is not a piece of Blue Line asset.
Right.
Then there's the photo speed device.
So we're talking about 4 different installations within, as you're approaching this, on either side of the school?
Correct.
Okay, so we're talking about 8 total. Okay. And I'm assuming that before y'all put any piece of equipment out there, you go through the DOT permitting
That's correct, yes, sir.
process, correct? Okay, good. Any questions on the tech side or the signage side? Okay, if you guys would step back, I'd greatly appreciate it. Is there someone here from Redline? Would be willing to come up and, yeah.
Redline's one, Jimmy Cotty's thing, you read his experience, you need to read that, it's pretty damning.
Is that AJC guy?
No, Jimmy's one of the lobbyists.
Seriously, yeah. So, don't want to replow a whole lot of ground. I think you heard what the last group was talking about their signage and the technology that they use.
Yes, sir.
Could you explain to us any similarities or differences in the technology and the signage that's used by your company?
Yes, sir. I'm Greg Parks with Red Speed. Thank you, Chairman, members. By statute, the bill passed in 2018, says photo enforcement ahead, 500 feet ahead. That's standard. Actually, Scott manufactures our equipment as well, Dragon Eye. So he would address that. As far as I think the Senator Albers and the committee is about your speed is, we have not employed that. We operate most of the systems in the state. So I think all in Senator Albers' district, Alpharetta, I don't know, Roswell's your district, that North Fulton County area. We have not been asked by our customers for this. Some actually have expressed an interest in less infrastructure on the highway or on the roads, additional signage. We absolutely are not opposed. In fact, we're in favor of. Obviously, if the legislature dictates it, we'll of course do it. And if the Alpharetta City Council or the Roswell City Council, et cetera, ask for that at our expense, we'd be happy to employ that. It is not a gotcha system. We want transparency. We want the motorists to know. We do believe they know, but so we have not employed that additional mechanism now because our customers have not asked for it, but we're happy to do it.
Well, and I appreciate that. And I want to say one thing about, you just made a comment that the customer knows or should know, or the citizen should know, as opposed to customer. And I don't like to go through a lot of osmosis. I know Chairman Bearden and I have both spent many years in law enforcement, and
Yes,
one
sir.
thing we did notice is we used to tell a lot of our folks to take a different route to work every day, because once you go the same route every day, you become conditioned. A lot of times you'll get to work and don't remember anything you saw from the time you left the house to the time you got to work, unless there was some anomaly along the way. You wouldn't know if trash cans were out, you wouldn't know if there was a mailbox knocked down and other things, unless there was some anomaly that jumped out at you. A lot of people get focused. There's a lot of technology in vehicles now, as the chairman was talking about earlier. I mentioned that I have my favorite podcasts, I have my favorite playlists, and I get wrapped up in an audiobook occasionally, and I know I leave Catala and then I end up at the parking deck over here at the Capitol a lot of times, not thinking about everything I saw in between there. So I could see me going past certain signs and something like that. Again, I do not speed, but or I do not try to speed, thanks to cruise control. But so I appreciate that. But have y'all looked into the cost of adding these devices
I-
along with your other products?
Yes, Chairman. I believe a figure of 1,000 to 3,000. So it's not a significant expense. I will absolutely concur with that. And on the record, we're not opposed to that. We're dictated by local customer now, independent of state legislation or state
Do
legislation.
you run any other equipment on you run flock cameras or anything of that nature?
If the customer requests that, yes.
Okay, so that's an individual request, and are your contracts primarily with municipalities or counties or school systems?
None with school systems. All cities or counties. The majority being cities because there's more cities than counties. One thing if I could note as far as the osmosis, so that's a great point. We've discussed this many times, or the legislature and us, that we are very data-driven and we do track the success. And statewide, we're seeing over 90% not receive a second citation. So it is modifying behavior. So I think that's the greatest measurement we believe in our customers of effectiveness because traffic patterns change, there's population growth, et cetera. So we're seeing great success.
You heard Chairman Powell testify to the notification being changed to where it would reference the government with the city seal or whatever on an envelope. Do you see that as an impediment?
No, sir.
Okay. Or I've never seen one of your citations. I've paid
That's
two.
good.
Well, I'll take that back. My wife has paid two. She's the one with the real job. Do you feel that the notifications y'all sent out are clear enough that the average citizen who we're inundated with junk mail today would be able to recognize that?
Well, the fact that the vast majority are paid and we're seeing less than 2% request adjudication statewide. So I believe so, yes, but that is anecdotal. I've discussed it with specific focus groups, et cetera. We're all about transparency. If making the envelope more prominent at our expense, we're happy to do that. We believe the law that was implemented in 2018, while no legislation, as you all know better than I do, is perfect, is a great law. It was recently cloned almost verbatim in Florida because of success it's had here. So directly answer your question, improving the envelope, whatever we're directed to do to improve the transparency, we're supportive of.
And Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for being here today. I actually sent over a very specific incident, so I just want to take you through to some of the folks who represent you here. And it's actually somebody who comes in this building almost every day that does government affairs work. I'm just going to take you through these steps. This is his words. I was paying renewal on 3 tags when I went to the tax commissioner's office, and I was told I could only do 2 because one had a hold due to a speed camera infraction. It was ironic, as I had just watched a debate on Representative Washburn Powell's bills in the House. I asked the lady how often this situation happens, and she said it happens all the time, and it's quite infuriating to both her as well as the folks that are there. She provided me a printout of the red speed camera, which actually I have a copy of the ticket that they printed out and gave to there. He said, when I called, I asked for a copy of the citation, was told repeatedly that she did not have to provide one, that being red speed. I was repeatedly asked to, quote, just pay the fine without paying any details of the citation. I told the lady at red speed I had no intentions of paying until I can confirm it was a legitimate citation. She insisted I just get the citation paid and it was legitimate. She told me that the Baldwin County Court would not talk to me if there was no hold in place, and I never was able to find out why, and found that quite interesting. I checked my call log, and after 34 minutes, she finally told me that she would email me a copy within the hour. Honestly, I felt she was simply trying to frustrate me into hanging up with no resolution. Her insistence to just pay the fine because all citations are legitimate, frankly, was pretty insulting. So this is a customer, citizen, if you will, for real time with your company there. How do you address those comments?
Thank you, Chairman, for bringing that to my attention. For clarification, customers, I was referring to the city of Alpharetta, the city of Columbus, not the motorist. That, to use a word that's been used a lot today, I would say that is extremely anecdotal. That's one incident, but I did research that upon you bringing it to our attention. We appreciate it. I spoke with our rep. She absolutely indicated she did not repeatedly ask him to pay the fine. The fine was paid that day. later. Within an hour, a copy of the citation was emailed to the motorist, who in research had received more than one citation. So hopefully this will improve his behavior as well. But we pride ourselves on customer service, and I want to take your comment very seriously. And I did reach out to the customer in Baldwin County in this case, as I believe that is kind of a local issue of customer service, and they're very pleased with our service. And I've spoken with our rep, and that conversation verbatim did not happen. And he was supplied with the notice. I think an hour and change to have something emailed to your office would be considered good customer service overall. Can't necessarily supply it while they're on the phone. So I take it very seriously. The registration hold is in the, to address your last one, I want to make sure, there was a lot to unpack there. I want to make sure I address it all for you. It is in your legislation passed in 2018 that after you go through all the processes, a first notice of over 30 days, a second notice of 30 more days, then a third notice of 30 more days, that the right to contest has expired. So that's what our rep was communicating was the state law, not a red speed practice.
So if I could follow up on that, two things. I mean, 34 minutes on the call log is a proven fact. So that's a long time for anyone to spend. But do you recall your customer service calls? Because I'd love to get a copy of that recording. And
I will look into that. I don't know that fact, but I'll ask.
okay, let's follow up on that then. This way we can clear the issue. Person who comes down here is quite well respected.
No, and I am not questioning their credibility. I just believe their remembering of what happened is different. So I'm not questioning anyone's credibility, Chairman.
Thank you.
Anything else for the witness? Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
We have a representative here from the Department of Transportation. Yes. Yes, sir. I want to thank y'all very much for coming out. I know y'all normally don't open up till 10 a.m. on weekdays, so
9:30.
Mondays and Wednesdays, that's right. Listen, I have a tremendous amount of respect for the Department of Transportation, the great job y'all do each and every day, and I think a lot of times people don't appreciate the minute details that y'all have to get involved in up and down our roads and highways here in Georgia, and I thank you for that. But could you help us understand the permitting process? If one of these municipalities want to put speed cameras up on the right-of-way?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. I'm Josh Waller with GDOT. I'm our Policy and Government Affairs Director. Alan Davis, our State Traffic Engineer, and Sam Harris, our State Safety Engineering Manager. So I'll defer to them.
Yeah.
Their office handles that permitting process.
Fantastic. If they could lean into the mic and explain that process to us, it'd be great.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman, members. I'll actually hand this over to Sam to walk through the process because he does deal with this on a day-to-day basis.
All right, Sam, you look like you're excited to be here. If you'll pull that mic over and tell us what's going on.
I'm excited because I have an answer. So, the process for permitting a automated speed enforcement device for a school zone, applicant does a submission. And then it goes to GDOT for review. So GDOT's comprised, we have a state office and we have our district offices. Our district offices are split out amongst the state geographically. So they have more in tune with the local governments and more of that relationship building to be able to take in what an applicant might submit during that process. So the first thing that happens is a permit engineer will review that application, and there can be back and forth between a permit engineer and the applicant or that submitted the actual permit. Once those comments have been rectified, if there are comments associated with that, the applicant then would sign the document, and then it would go to what is called a district engineer or a district traffic engineer. They're in sense that lead the district offices. So once that has been signed by our district traffic engineer, the permit is then released, and it then is satisfied and ends its process.
Okay, and as part of that processing, there's the engineering looked at for safety purposes to ensure that we're not putting up a traffic hazard, I guess?
I think the other thing which they could speak to is before you have the cameras, you have a process to define as a school zone. So there is a study, so the school zone that was established prior to that, do you all want to speak to that process? Because then the camera overlays.
4 minutes, yeah, that's what we was talking about.
Yeah, so every school zone and speed limit has what we call an engineering and traffic investigation, a study associated with it that determines through engineering judgment the speed, if different from statutory speed, what it should be. And that applies to school zones as well. Sam, anything to add to that?
Yeah, so that is correct. In order for an automated school enforcement device to be permitted, it needs to have a permit on file for an actual school zone, which is in fact a different process. It goes through a similar review process. It is submitted to the DOT. We review it. We look at the documentation. The engineering and traffic investigation is one of the key pieces that our engineers would look at to be able to assess to see if there is justification for putting in a school zone. Once it goes through the GDOT process, it goes to public safety for their review and approval and final sign off.
Is this for public and private schools?
It would,
Same process?
yes, sir. Yes, sir. It would be for either school type, as long as it's on our roadway.
Okay, you say our roadway.
It's a state's roadway.
State roadway. So it would not be inside the municipalities, who's responsible for designating the school zones?
So every school zone on a roadway, whether it be state route or local road, has the similar process, and it's added to what we call our list of roads.
Okay.
And that defines where these speed limits are, beginning and ending, milepost marker and ending, and it has that same study attached to it.
Do y'all dictate signage for school zones?
So most of the signage that we do dictate through there is tied back to what's called the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, several thousand-page document that establishes all the regulatory conditions and rules around these things, and that's what we closely follow in our own standards and specifications as to what should be at a school zone.
And I hope I'm not asking a question that would fall somewhere else, but as far as flashing lights, is every school zone in Georgia mandated to have flashing lights?
No, not at this time.
Okay. And where does that responsibility fall to? The individual school district or another government agency?
Yeah, that would be at the local jurisdiction's discretion. The only key thing is that there are, he mentioned the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. There are certain guidance on which type of signage can have flashing lights. Just would flag that for you as y'all move the legislation through the process.
So is there an opportunity then that if a district wanted to put flashing lights, they could not, based on some other circumstance outside of our just the generic thinking that every school zone needs a flashing light? If there's some other issue that would prevent that from happening?
The one thing that comes to mind why I mentioned that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that certain types of signs can't have flashing lights. So if you just had posted camera enforced, you can't just, the manual would not allow you to put flashing lights on that.
On
That's
that
what I meant. I
particular
wasn't
sign.
speaking to not
No,
being able
no.
to put flashing lights. There's just certain signs
Right.
that it has to meet a certain sign type,
Because
and you can get into
it would be a distraction from the initial sign? Is that the reasoning, or?
Well, the flashing beacons are warning beacons meant to reinforce a regulatory sign. So they are limited to, within the MUTCD, signs that are enforcing a condition. So in this instance, the photo enforced sign is not necessarily a regulatory, it's informational, but it is a photo enforced zone. The school zone speed limit is in fact the regulatory control. So that is where we would affix the flashing beacons to today to indicate that that condition is active.
I see what you're saying. Some are state regulatory and others are just informational signs
Yes,
that
sir.
the school district itself may put up, therefore precluding it to fall into the flashing light regs within the 1,000-page guidebook, correct?
That's correct, sir. The intent is to draw attention to that condition, that regulatory condition that is present or in effect.
And again, another question to maybe put you guys in a spot, but these speed signs we're talking about where they show what the speeds are. My concern is, our first roundabout in Columbus was basically a peanut down at a very historic park. And we had grave concerns about it because they put this little roundabout in and they added 17 signs to discuss this roundabout, which way you go, roundabout ahead, all this other stuff. And one day, one of my guys called me and said, you know, sir, there's 17 new signs down here. And I went down there and looked, thinking he was exaggerating, and there were 17 signs. Well, my concern as a law enforcement officer is there's more things for people to hit, because the right-of-way is there as a buffer in many cases. And when you start putting things in that buffer, and so I'm assuming all of that is taken into consideration in engineering, and in those situations where it is a hazard, then it would not be conducive to put that type of equipment out there, right?
Correct. Those are looked at. And I'll note that when we were working, when Chairman Burns had reached out to us on his legislation, where we were provided some information to help encourage to the degree you can consolidate. If you have different goals for signage, consolidating as much as you can on a post would be optimal.
Yes.
If you were here for the Senate Economic and Development Committee meeting, that is going to be down in the Senate Mez. Walk right out of here, go down the stairs. It's right in the corner. So again, this meeting is going to continue economic development downstairs in the Senate Mez.
And I'll warn you now, it's not going to be nearly as interesting, but it's down in the mess. Any questions from the committee related to DOT, the sign regulation, and the process for permitting for the vendors or municipalities that seek to install these cameras in the community? Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate y'all very much. Department of Public Safety. Yes, I should have known it. Like two G-men sitting on the front row. Welcome, and thank y'all so much for coming in. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Means a lot. I think we sit in this room, all of us can start naming speed traps around the state. We're all familiar with them. I get friends going down to Florida, Jacksonville. They text me all the time, and you know, and I think Chairman Powell mentioned the billboards that were put up in years past. And I think the best thing we have to prevent that is you guys and the way y'all regulate speed management throughout the state. Could you, first of all, let me ask you, I know radar and other things come under y'all's jurisdiction. Do these speed cameras come under your jurisdiction as of today?
I'll let you speak to that.
They are on the LOR for these agencies, but as far as us being able to investigate them for their fine to ratio, or their fine to their fine to budget ratios,
yeah.
they're have been excluded since 2018. But you know, on the LORs, they're listed, you know, what roadways they're on and things.
Explain LOR.
So that's your list of roadways, as GDOT explained. That's
Right.
where they're allowed to run speed detection.
But if there is a complaint of manipulation, if there's a complaint of writing citations outside of the time, as we know, years past, I think the city of Casita moved their city limit signs. You guys took action because the purpose of that was to write more citations within the city limit. Other agencies, and I mentioned Waverly Hall a couple of times, and I only mention them because they're part of my district, and they ran into it a few times where they were running radar in areas they should not be running radar, knowingly running radar in areas. And so they lost the ability to use that equipment for, I think, a year or two, which I greatly appreciate. So right now, if somebody is using this equipment improperly, do y'all have any jurisdiction over that equipment?
No, sir, not in I think the aspect that you're trying to say as far as timing, whether they're riding under the 10 miles an hour outside of the school zone times, because the civil monetary penalties were specifically excluded in the legislation. The only thing we really have jurisdiction over is the fact that the devices have to be certified, they have to be approved, and they have to be on the LOR. And
Okay.
that's pretty much the extent.
And have you run into any issues where there were devices not approved or not on the LOR?
No, we haven't run into that as a specific complaint. But, you know, of course, we've received complaints of people saying that they've received tickets outside of the hours and things of that nature.
And a lot of times that's a local contract issue, is that right, with the
Yes, sir.
municipality? Okay, Chairman Albers.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for being here and the great work Department of Public Safety does each and every day to keep our citizens safe and respond to their critical time of need. You're talking about the LOR, and I'm saying this, I'm getting back to technology in cars. I've got a very smart car. It's much smarter than I am. It not only will tell me that the speed limit has changed, it'll tell me if there is a school zone, if there is a camera. It will tell me candidly when a stoplight is counting down before it's going to turn green again. And now in some parking garages, it'll actually tell me where there's parking available, literally. Are you feeding that system into those smart vehicles? Because I think, I'm saying this because I believe this is going to be part of the solution to keep people safer at time, or are they getting it from you? Can you explain that to me?
We are not feeding that information into technology, sir.
Okay.
Now, as far as the traffic lights, I don't know if GDOT is providing any type of feed to somebody, but it would not come from public safety.
Do y'all also manage red light cameras or any other type of traffic control devices beyond
No, sir.
Not
the
our
radar?
office.
Okay, all right,
Thank you.
all right. And any questions of the committee? Do we have any speed traps right now that y'all are?
Well, a lot of it is citizen-driven. I mean, we only respond to complaints.
Right.
There's not an audit process that we go out to agencies and audit them for compliance. It's all complaint-driven.
Do y'all go out and look at this equipment when the permits come across your desk that this equipment's going in to ensure that it is certified and that every?
They have to supply the certification documents along with the permit. That's part of the permit process.
Right. Have y'all received any citizens' complaints well, I guess you answered that question, but it's related to them outside of the time, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And your response can only be back, well, that's a contractual relationship with the municipality that you received the citation?
It is, but Sergeant Medler's done a fantastic job of trying to work with the citizens and call whatever respective agency it is and say, hey, they're saying that this happened outside the time. Can you check your times on your cameras to make sure that they're complying? And most agencies, if not all agencies, have been receptive to making sure that their equipment is accurate.
And have y'all received complaints about school zones or anything?
That's what we're talking about,
Okay.
school zone
Well, I'm
cameras.
just talking about not necessarily the cameras. I've been through school zones on a Saturday when the flashing lights were on. And I reached out to the superintendent in Columbus and said, hey, David, I don't know if anything's going on, but and he said, well, everything's ran off the computer.
Correct.
I
Everything's
have
software.
received, yes, sir, I've
Yeah.
received phone calls regarding that, and typically I would reach out to the school system and the police agency in that local area and tell them, what I've learned and urge them to go ahead and correct that.
Yeah. Do you find that the vast majority of them are unintentional?
That's what it appears like to me. A time change has occurred and they haven't just kept up with that, or something else.
Power
And
failures sometimes,
oversight.
and that when it starts back up for some reason, the timing is not right on it.
Thank you. Chairman Albers.
Yeah, one more question. Today, you're familiar with the 35% rule, I believe.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
If a municipality or agency is going above that 35%, are you all responsible for measuring, maintaining, and then correcting that behavior?
Yes, sir.
In unison.
So that would include, let's say, a couple small cities on I-75 annexed a mile of the interstate and are now got cars out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and best of our ability, got about 400% of their entire city's revenue through.
Very familiar
Yes,
with
sir.
that, yes, sir.
Okay, all right, we'll talk offline. Thank you.
And all of these ghosted vehicles that are out there, right?
That's one of the things that we look at is marking of the patrol vehicles. They're required to have 4-inch lettering, blue lights, things of that nature.
4-inch lettering, but the color can be a slight tint off of the base color of the vehicle.
Yes, sir.
Which as a law enforcement officer, I find counterintuitive to let your citizens know you're out there serving and protecting them, right? When you're
Believe
trying
the-
to hide in plain sight.
I believe the code section says contrasting, and I think some
That's
people.
the debatable question,
Yes, sir.
right? Or the word is what's contrasting.
Yes, sir.
I mean, as our vehicles were very bright and visible, and I've gone to university campuses and other places where I wouldn't know it was a law enforcement vehicle if the sun didn't hit it just right. So those are some concerns I'd be glad to reach out to you guys too at another date and time. But listen, I greatly appreciate the job y'all do.
Thank you, sir.
I think what you do is you help maintain the integrity that I hope every law enforcement agency out there wants to be, and wants to have. And we do know that occasionally there are those bad actors. They're rare, and sadly, they're sometimes in the smaller jurisdictions that hope to kind of stay out of the light. And I appreciate police that police the police. So I really appreciate what y'all do, and thank you for what you do for the citizens of Georgia.
Thank you, sir.
Thank y'all. Chairman, you said you had a sheriff that wanted to testify? Is he here?
I'm not sure if he has gotten here. I texted him a moment ago. He was on the way.
You don't think he got pulled over, do you? Oh, here he is. Here he is. Is this your sheriff here coming up behind you?
Yeah, it is. Good morning, Sheriff.
Sheriff, if you'll grab this seat right down here.
Okay.
Sheriff, we talked to Chairman Washburn yesterday, and he said he thought you would want to come in and testify to what you believe about these cameras.
I would. I'll try to be as brief as I can. Had a long night. I'm sorry I was running a little late, but
if you introduce yourself, Sheriff.
Oh, okay. It's Gary Long, Sheriff of Butts County. The reason I'm here is I talked to a representative, and since these cameras started, I've just had a bad taste in my mouth for them. And I was approached by 2 companies. And I can't tell you the companies, even if you ask me. I ain't trying to hide it from you, but it's been years ago, and I don't remember which companies they were. But there was 2 different companies, and so my assistant set up a meeting with me. They come into the office, and salesmen, that's what they were. They didn't show me statistics. They didn't show me how many kids were being hit at crosswalks. They didn't tell me how it's going to reduce things. Their exact words to me they said, Sheriff, if you let us put these cameras up in your school zones, we'll guarantee you between $1 to $2 million in revenue a year that you can spend how you need to spend on your equipment. So from day one, I had a problem with them. My second problem with them, and I was listening to the technicians speak, I'm not nowhere near their level. I was a little bit educated this morning, but
we appreciate that.
But we are requiring less from a camera than we do a deputy, a police officer, or a trooper that took an oath. We're requiring less. On radar, it's got to be before shifts, you got to calibrate it, log it. At the end of shift, you got to calibrate it and log it. And at every traffic stop, you've got to offer that calibration. And if the violator says they want it, you have to do it. Now, a laser is a little bit different because you can't calibrate a laser during a traffic stop. We have set footage signs at the office, but in order for that to be admissible in court, we've got to show that we did a calibration check on that laser at the start of shift, an accuracy test, and we have to show one at the end of the shift every day. And if we don't, then it's just the case is dead in the water.
Now, Sheriff, when I was in court watching them do that, they had a post-certified law enforcement officer there who explained how often the equipment calibrated, explained what type of equipment it was laser, and gave the details surrounding the technology. Would that suffice as what you feel is testimony in a civil action case related to a citation?
To be completely honest, not to be rude, but completely honest, there's nothing you're going to tell me that's going to make me agree with them.
Well, first of all, I'm not telling you anything. I'm asking you a question. What you just said, and this is us, challenging each other on this because, to be honest with you, what happens with the cameras is whatever happens. The legislation's going to happen. But what you just said, that was the failure. Would that not suffice as addressing that failure?
I don't know if it'd be a failure. Right. Because I don't know their camera. I thought I was under the impression, based off the signs, they were radars until this morning.
Yes, sir.
And they said it was lasers. If the courts say that, but I think what brings me to my next point is, let me walk you through a little history here, if I've got it right. I remember when I started in early 2000, or at this one sheriff's office, early 2000. You might remember these days from your time in serving. I don't remember. I started in 96. But I had a deputy was telling me, and I went to the sheriff at the time and talked to him, and he confirmed it. And so the sheriff used to get paid based off citations issued. He got paid off civil papers served. He got paid off how many people he had in the jail. That's how he got paid. And I had this deputy, he was probably in his early 60s, and he was telling me, talking to me, I thought he was lying. And he said, yeah, the sheriff used to send us out to the cemetery to write tickets to dead people. And he'd submit them to the state, and the sheriff would get his check. And so when I went to the sheriff I worked for, I said, is this true? And he said, absolutely. And it was corruption across the state. And what I was told, I haven't read this, and y'all might know better than I do, but what I was told was the legislative body of Georgia said we're going to set salaries of sheriff to stop that. Here's minus. They never told. And look, I'm a unique county. I'm a very unique county. I'm not Muskogee County. I'm not DeKalb County. I'm not Fulton County. So our schools are different. I've got 3 tickets from cameras. Not me personally, I got 1. I've got 2 my son got that was well after the hours of school zones, and it's been a nightmare. We're still fighting it. We've done affidavits, and it's out of Henry County. The one I got, I sold that truck probably 5 years prior to receiving a ticket. So I then called the guy I sold it to and said, did you get it out of my name? And he said, yes. He sent me all the stuff. So when he sent me that, I thought, I ain't paying anything. I ain't got to worry about it. It ain't going to hit my tag. Never heard anything else at all about that. But ultimately, what we're looking for in these cameras, or let me back up, in traffic enforcement, you know this as good as I do, we want to change that behavior instantly. I tell my deputies all the time, I don't care if you write 500 warnings or you write 500 tickets. Warning and tickets, same thing. But at the end of the day, I find it just don't sit right with me. It don't sit right with people in my community that I've talked to, that we have private companies that's capitalizing on a criminal code section. I don't know this. There's troopers here that probably could tell you this for sure. The speeding ticket is probably the #1 ticket written in the state of Georgia, I would imagine.
I would think so.
I commend these companies for what they did. I commend them. Very profitable. Very, very profitable. But at the end of the day, I can't see how we can take a criminal code section, put it under the pretense of being civil, because, I heard sitting here in the back this morning, listening to Chairman Powell. So I come in just a few minutes late, but I was listening. I almost sounded like I was listening to what we're going to do with tax money. We're going to take this part's going to go here, and this part will go to the school. So I hear at my Board of Commissioners meeting, and it only leads me to believe taxation through citation. That's what it makes me believe. Look, there's nobody that's going to be more proactive to protect the children than I am. That's what I do it every day. But you turn on the TV, and I went through one of these before that wasn't pleasant at all, and it was a marijuana bill that I was up arguing. But I can always remember it was, and I dealt with this in Washington too, but it was for the kids. For the kids. Turn on the TV, and there's a thing come on, and they have the saddest children on there and say, donate to this hospital, donate to this charity, donate to this. The kids need you. And once again, here we are again for the safety of the kids. Granted, Fulton County, Muskogee County, Augusta, Columbia, these big places, they might truly have an issue. I don't know. I don't work there. Yeah. In my county, we have, I don't know if anybody even rides the bus anymore. You can't speed through our school zone anymore. We have deputies with blue lights on out directing traffic. And once those kids are dropped off, you would think our school was closed, minus the cars in the front, because of the safety protocols after the school shootings. If the kids do go outside, they're behind the school. nowhere near a road. Now, we're unique, and that's all our schools. I know this is not a fix for all.
How many schools do you have, Sheriff?
We have 5 schools and then an alternative school.
Okay.
That's what we have in the county.
You obviously don't like the technology, and I respect that,
Well-
and I think that's what we're trying to figure out.
Right, and I can't say I don't like the technology. I don't like the principle behind the technology, and I'll tell you how I'd like it. If we do away with the criminal code section of speeding and make it civil across the board. Just do away with it. Make speeding the civil code section. It don't affect the guy's license, woman's license. They don't-
Insurance, it's not reported insurance.
Make it all civil. But I think all too often it looks like, I watched through the marijuana thing. I think that's something, the last study, when I was in one of these hearings, they said 70% of the population smokes marijuana. So Atlanta says, well, we're not gonna charge you criminally, but we're gonna have a civil penalty. So it's like we always go to the civil penalty to rake in money. My high school, and I'll stop with this, my high school has never won a state championship. Football. I love football. They've never won a state championship. I think we just spent about $14 million on a football field. We went to the Dome in 2000 one time, and we didn't make it out of the semifinals, and we were done. We don't have big donors. It come out of the E-SPLOS, what it come out of. So signage in any school zone, the way it's funded is through E-SPLOS. If we can spend, that football field ain't making nobody any safer. My deputies are making them safer at that football field. But if we can spend $12 million on a football field, we can spend $10,000 on signage.
Okay, I appreciate that. And you and I agree. I despise marijuana, and the high school I went to has never won a state championship in
Got
football.
a lot in common, apparently.
So I appreciate that. And I appreciate your testimony, and it means a lot.
Well, I appreciate it being a serious issue. And look, I believe this. I appreciate each and every one of you. And we, the people, put you in where you're at, and we believe in what you're going to do. And I just, all I can ask is we got to fix it.
Yeah.
We got to fix it.
Chairman Albers.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll join the chorus of the high schools not winning championships and definitely against all things marijuana. Sheriff, first off, thank you for your service and all the deputies you have down in Butts County. We appreciate it. I think you got a VIP that lives in your county down there.
We do. Me and him's kind of at odds on this, but we do.
All right, well, that's good. Let's talk through this a little more because I think you're bringing up some very valid points. Obviously, population-wise, you're not a tiny county, but you're not a big county. And you're able to solve the issues that you need on a school zone by using your deputies both for ingress, egress during school beginning and ending. But then you brought up a point that I don't think we're talking about a lot, which is during the day, schools are pretty much locked down. Now, there are some on this equation that said, no, they should be running all day long. Somebody could be coming and dropping off, little Susie forgot her lunch at home, or Johnny forgot his social studies book, so we need to make sure that those cameras are running all day long. Same thing if they're having a football game or a baseball game, et cetera, that they should constantly be running. But I think what you're saying, and I know this is probably true for every school system, I would think, is during the day they're locked down. And if you're having a big event at nighttime, you probably have deputies there anyway, don't you?
I do.
And then the next thing I have to ask, and this is just your personal take on this, Sheriff, I think there's a misnomer in this world that, cameras equal safety no matter what. Because we could put a camera on every single road, every single interstate, every single side road, every single everything, no matter what anybody may or may not be doing wrong, we could perceive that could somehow make things safer. Now, I come from a different school of thought there. I'm more of a Benjamin Franklin fan. Those who would give up a little liberty for a little security deserve neither. But for being an elected sheriff, one of the few and elite in our state, what is your theory in that in general?
I don't think anybody wants to live in a police state. I don't. I think cameras have their place. I do believe they have their place. And I can only speak on this. There's a flock camera. That camera's not used to run surveillance on people. That camera's not used to pry in people's information. But that is the greatest tool that I have seen in many, many, many years. Probably the whole time I've been policing, probably one of the greatest tools. So I think...
What is it used for, Sheriff, in your county, the flock?
So pretty much in and out of our county, we have flock cameras. And it's the only time we ever use flock cameras if we have a crime, and it's going to be something from an armed robbery to an abducted child, and the technology in that. You can put in a car description, it's going to give you that. If you have a tag number, you put it in, it'll give you that. We've solved a lot of crime, murders, armed robberies, within a couple of hours because of flock cameras. So cameras, I think there's a great place for cameras, but I'm not saying a camera is a fix-all by no means.
Would you say that cameras, not the flock camera, but other cameras are more there for evidence gathering as opposed to, in other words, cameras don't necessarily prevent crimes. They allow law enforcement officers to find leads when crimes occur, whether it be an armed robbery at a convenience store or whether it be a crash out on the highway, let's say a red light camera or something like that, is they'll go back and review some of that footage to see who entered the intersection.
Yes, I was about 4 o'clock this morning. I was at our local EMC going through cameras because we had a home invasion.
Right.
And was able to get the vehicle off of it. Then we plugged that into flock, and we were able to get the guy.
Yeah, but to Chairman Albert's point, the cameras, the value is on the back side, not on the front side.
That's right.
Yeah, most burglars will walk right past the camera.
It, not think nothing of it.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
And if I could, I'm not trying to be long-winded.
You're a politician. Go
I
ahead,
know
Sheriff.
this was mentioned from Department of Public Safety. I don't know that percentage. I wish I had it with you, but I know that counties, municipalities, there's a percentage of money that they can take. 35%. But in that 35%, correct me if I'm wrong, school zones don't count.
School zones don't count. Super speeder doesn't count.
Anything, but yeah, so 14, 15 and up,
Right.
That doesn't count. But anything, so what I'm getting at is these cameras in our school zones could generate 300 times that number, and they would still be good to go. Maybe it could be something, and I'll tell you what's going to happen. Maybe it could be something to where those camera enforcement, it goes against the municipality or the county's government, and then I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. We ain't never got to do this again because camera companies going to quit because they ain't going to make the money that they're making, and it ain't going to be cost effective for them to continue. Because then the cities and counties would be limited. I do believe this. I'm not saying for all city police departments. I'm not saying all county sheriffs or police departments, but I've worked for both. And I can tell you there is a hard drive in city police departments. A lot, not all. You got some great ones, and I love them all. But you have administrators, mayors, council, and that's what they do is they push to generate revenue. I think they have a loophole with these cameras that does not get compared to their budget by these guys in the suit and ties that says you're right, you're right, you're right. And if that was put in there, then there's a limit to it. Right now it's just policing for profit. They can get all they want, and a private company makes it.
Well, Sheriff, I appreciate you. I don't see any other questions. If you got time to hang around, I'd love to talk to you afterwards.
I will.
Thank you.
All
I
right,
appreciate
thank
you
you.
a lot.
Thank you.
James R. Dutton, we have the room, I believe, for another 30 minutes, and then we're out. Mr. Dutton, I almost know your testimony. I've been watching you nod and shake your head the entire time.
I get very passionate about this.
I would agree with you on that.
Thank you, sir.
And would you tell us who you are and who you're with?
Sure. My name is James R. Dutton. I'm the vice chair of the Spalding County Commission, but I'm also leading the way from the members of the defense bar in Georgia. I'm taking my case that I could have signed an affidavit that it wasn't me. I could have challenged it in many different ways, all the way to the state Supreme Court now for the second time. We've been bounced back and forth. The filing fee there, by the way, is $300. So I paid a $300 filing fee instead of a $100 ticket. Why? Because the first thing I learned, one block north of here, at Georgia State Law School on my very first day, is that the only rights that we have are the rights that we assert. And the moment you stop asserting them, you lose them, and you do not get them back. That doesn't just go for me individually, that goes for us as a society. So I'm not here to talk about fixing a bill or which one you guys, that's going to be up to you. I'm here to talk about the rights of Georgians under the Constitution that we all as elected officials swore an oath to uphold and protect. So let's talk about that. In Spalding County, I've written some notes. I didn't have a prepared statement, but I wanted to talk about some of the points that have been raised, so if you'll indulge me. This might be a little bit more disjointed than otherwise. The cost in Spalding County to go from one state court judge, now we're only 70,000 people, to go from one state court judge that normally does 8,000, 9,000 total cases in a year to the 4 state court judges that we will need to be able to prosecute these cases and give everyone their due process rights is $1.9 million per additional judge. Okay? So that's almost $6 million in cost for judges, cost for prosecutors, cost for bailiffs, et cetera, et cetera. We have raised less than that in the 2 years that this program has been active in Spalding County. Now, how many tickets has Spalding County written? Again, there's right at 70,000 people in Spalding County. Take a guess. Take a crazy guess. Over 90,000 of these tickets have been written just in Spalding County. That's almost 2.5 tickets per driver in our county. So to say that these have been effective in slowing people down is ludicrous. That's simply not the case. If you look, just as Sheriff Long, and I really appreciate him, and I'm glad that Spalding County is situated right next to Butts County. We have such wonderful officials there. If you look at what the intent behind these corporations is, they're for-profits. If you look at the intent behind what the original legislation was, well, how do we get more money? How do we fund this? How do we fund this? The legislative intent is clearly money. It's clearly policing for profit, except it's not the police doing it. In Spalding County, the idea, again, that Sheriff Long brought up, that this is something to protect children. In Spalding County's entire history, not once is there any recorded instance of a child being hurt or killed in a school zone. Not once, ever. And yet we've written 90,000 of these tickets in 2 years. But I'll tell you what has happened. Not every school even has sidewalks to it in Spalding County. We're a relatively rural county. But those that are in town, those that the district, in fact, that I live in Spalding County, do have sidewalks, do have crosswalks, and had crossing guards that were there in the morning and in the afternoon. But now, since this program, they're no longer needed. So we don't have crossing guards anymore. So we know that no one's slowing down, and yet now we don't have crossing guards. This school zone safety program has demonstratively made our children less safe. If the intent was to make it more safe, you've done the opposite. Now, let's talk about privacy. These cameras write tickets, and there have been several instances where it's come and gone when they've been outside of the time or on Saturdays. You know, there's anecdotal evidence of that. That happened a lot when this first started in Spalding County as well. However, they've really honed it in to that time, which is great. However, the cameras are on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, ours are operated by radar. All the camera systems that I've spoken with, this is the first I've heard today that some are actually laser. All of those cameras take a picture of every car that passes, not just the speeders, every single one. That data goes to the for-profit corporation in Seattle. That corporation, for some strange reason, has been given unfettered access to the registration office. And so they get your address, they get your name, they get your tax history, They get all of that information that is available exclusively right now to government officials and law enforcement. If I get sideswiped on my way to Henry County, where I'm due in Henry County Superior Court at 9 a.m., so I hope they'll indulge me.
Don't speed.
Right. If I get sideswiped and I get a picture of the tag, but the guy drives away, and I call one of my friends, like Sheriff Long, and say, hey, can you run this? I want to sue this guy. He hit my car. He owes me money. It's illegal for him to do that. And yet, for some reason, we have given a for-profit corporation carte blanche to run every single person every single time they pass any of these any of these cameras. That's all, every time I pass them. That's every time my wife passes them. That's every time you pass them. That's every time your wife passes them. What can they do with that data? Anything they want.
Do the cameras you go by in Spalding County, they have flock attached to them?
They're not attached. That is a separate system. The flock system has its own issues. However, this is a totally different idea.
What is the corporation based in Seattle?
This is the Vera Mobility. It's very hard to actually get information on.
Yeah, they're not
that
here
camera.
today. So yeah,
I don't believe that they're here today. That said, they weren't at or no representatives of there were there at the trial court hearing when we had our hearing, even though they were subpoenaed to be. And even though the person that had done their certifications, even though the person that had done their installations, even the person that signs the piece of paper that says these cameras are up to date and they're calibrated correctly, were all subpoenaed to be there. None of them were there.
Okay. Chairman Albers.
First and foremost, thank you so much for coming down here and fighting the good fight. You brought up a very interesting point, because I actually have the data privacy legislation for the state of Georgia that's hopefully going to move out of the House committee today and get passed upon. But today, you were right. Anybody who's capturing that information of anybody going through, whether they're speeding or not, is literally capturing that person's license plate.
That's right.
Now, they can at that point either delete that information if they're not speeding, based on their own protocols, and I'm sure the fine folks here can tell us what their internal processes are. But there's actually nothing illegal for them to hold on to that information. There's nothing that prevents them from doing that.
Or sell it.
Correct. Well, that's the whole thing, right? So data is modern day oil and gold.
That's right.
In fact, no, it's more valuable. So today, if I know that these cars, based on their licensing, their demographics, their taxes, their everything is going this way all the time, I've taken a marketing asset that would be worth 1/10 of 1 penny and made it 100 times greater to target market.
That's right.
That's something we have not talked about, and we should be talking about, folks.
Well,
It's an
and
incredible
even to the flock thing, private citizens can purchase flock cameras.
And once they do, they get access to that full
No,
information.
that's what I'm saying. Private citizens, neighborhood watch groups, and others can purchase flock cameras and install them into their
That's correct.
communities as neighborhood watch, if you
That's
will.
right.
Yeah.
And right now, the flock cameras in general are
And I don't
being
wanna-
used
I
for
don't-
good.
yeah,
This
yeah.
is a separate issue. However, they do have the potentiality, if someone wanted to use them for bad, to be used for bad. Right now in Canada, they're using their equivalent of the flock cameras to lock down people's bank accounts who are traveling to protest against the government.
Yeah.
I mean, that's happening in Canada.
Yeah.
Not Venezuela.
Yeah.
Not China.
Well, and Canada doesn't have a constitution.
Right.
But also, back to your point, as an attorney, and you have these cases going through, have you looked at the contract signed by this individual, and is it a county or municipal?
No, this is specifically our sheriff unilaterally signed this contract.
Okay,
it
so
never
this is-
came before the county
Okay,
commission.
have you seen the contract that the sheriff signed?
I have seen the contract. I've seen some of the permits for some of the cameras. He can't provide all the
Is
permits
there
for all
anything in the
cameras.
contract that describes what has to be done with the data? Because we've done other things to where the data has to be dumped, even in law enforcement, where the data has to be dumped within 60 days.
I don't believe there's
Where-
any such
Where
requirement.
Sheriff Long was talking earlier about how if there's they're looking for a particular vehicle and all this, they can activate the flock, gather the information, but anybody that is not related to the information they're looking for, that data is disposed of within a certain time frame, so that law enforcement doesn't create a database of individuals who have violated no law or violated any ordinance.
I don't believe that's a requirement. However, we did hear from one of the companies today that they were able to look up who they considered to Senator Albert's point, that the person they considered to be lying to Senator Albers, that they had looked up and seen their
Multiple
entire history.
citations.
Hey,
Yeah.
so they had that citation history. The corporation did, not law enforcement. The corporation did. So
Right.
to say that they're dumping it and getting rid of it is
No, I'm saying if
not
it's,
true.
if it's.
I
no,
don't
no,
believe it's
I'm
required.
saying if it's in the contract that they have to
I
dispose
suppose
of
I suppose it could be. I don't believe it
Yeah.
is in this contract.
Okay.
However, what is in that contract is the right for that for-profit corporation to, along with its letter of marque and reprisal, to put the symbol of the Spalding County Sheriff's Department on their mailers. So you guys were talking about maybe that would make it more obvious. Well, that's already happening in Spalding County. They get what looks like a letter from the Sheriff's Department. It's not a letter from the Sheriff's Department. It's a for-profit corporation that's trying to get money out of you. Immediately when you put in, I would like a hearing, automatically what gets sent back. Now, I've represented over 40 defendants in these cases, including myself. When you put in for a hearing, every single time, they send you back an official-looking document with the sheriff's seal on it that says, you're out of time, you can't, you just have to pay it. You don't get a hearing. You have to force and fight, and they send you final notices with the sheriff's seal on it. No, 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 if you don't do this, you're not gonna be able to register your car. What looks like force of law. Now, again, if I sued that driver that sideswipes me, and he says, I don't think I sideswiped you, I think you got the wrong guy, I think we need to have a hearing, and I sent him something from the court that said, no, you don't get a hearing, you just have to pay me, I'd be found in contempt. That's illegal. I can't do that. And yet this corporation does it for every single citation, over 90,000.
Real quick, Representative Washburn, what company has the contract there in Bibb County?
Altumint, Altumint is on the name of the invoice that I have.
Altumint, and then this company is
So this is Vera Mobility,
Vera
but
Mobility.
Vera Mobility only does a portion of it. When I subpoenaed for my hearing the calibration data. It's the computer itself saying, no, I'm calibrated correctly. And every hour it goes, no, I'm calibrated correctly. No, I'm calibrated correctly. No human actually does that. When I finally forced and pushed through to get any information, I don't know if you guys are aware of the rules of evidence, but an out-of-court statement asserted for the truth is called hearsay. That's the definition. If somebody is out of court asserting a statement that somebody else told them, that's hearsay within hearsay. Well, this is 4 deep hearsay. They've subcontracted to a subcontractor who subcontracted it to a sub. We're 4 deep in hearsay, and yet the court had to let it in, or all of these cases would be thrown out. This is one of the parts of my appeal to the state, however.
In your first case went how far?
Well, the first case went to the state Supreme Court, but that was on a motion.
Okay.
And so they said, well, since no one's actually been harmed yet, even though 90,000 people have paid these tickets just in Spalding County, they said, no, since in this case he hasn't actually paid the ticket, we have to do it on the full hearing. That said, the amount that we're now going back and forth, I believe that we're now back in the appeals court from the Supreme Court. I think they might be waiting on y'all to pass 225 and hoping that they don't have to make a decision. And I would be totally fine with that. Again, it's amazing what you can do for law and justice and for the rights of and protecting the rights of people when you don't care who gets credit for it. So
Right.
I don't want my name on it. I just want it to go away.
I appreciate you. I want to keep moving. Any questions from the committee? Thank you, Mr. Dutton. I hope you make it to court on time today.
Thank y'all for
I don't
letting me
want you to
come.
be held in contempt.
Thank y'all for letting me come this morning.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jeff Jackson, Georgia Independent School Association.
Absolutely support
Honored
you.
that you came.
Good to see you again, Mr. Jackson. If you'll sit there at the,
Good morning.
good morning.
Thank you. Thank you. I've learned a lot sitting here this morning.
That's what we try to do.
You're great. You're great. So I think the first, thank you for everybody doing this, both Representative Washburn and Representative Powell for both pieces of legislation. Georgia Independent School, for those of you who don't know, we are the largest independent school association in the Southeast United States. We represent 173 schools with 84,000 Georgia students. And we go from Tallulah Falls to Damascus, Rome to Waycross. We're all over the state. All of them are independent schools, non-government. All but I think 2 of them are not-for-profits. So just to kind of give you an idea who we are. I myself, I live in Milledgeville, so I'm familiar with the Baldwin County situation with this. And 2 years ago, as the state president of the independent schools, my phone started blowing up, absolutely blowing up. Our schools were calling. Where did these come from? We're getting calls from both our parents as well as community members. Why did you put these up? Why are you taking this money from us? It just goes on and on. And it struck me during all the conversation today and the last couple of years, there's a point that's kind of been also missed, and maybe I could get y'all to think about it this way. As a headmaster in Atlanta before coming here, I was in Atlanta, Fulton County. I had Mount Vernon Highway and Johnson Ferry on either side of my campus. Every single day, morning and afternoon, our school paid off-duty officers, blue lights, cars to take care of egress on and off this campus to keep everybody safe. That's how much we take school safety, always. But not all school zones are created alike. The model that's being tried to use here is pretty much a public model, and we are specifically mentioned in the private schools here. It is a model in an independent school where we don't have children crossing in. We don't have big buses coming in. We're kind of a carpool or parent coming in and out model. It's completely different. And yet the cameras go up in front of our schools, and they're writing tickets. In Baldwin County, you mentioned whoever that was. I can tell you that in front of John Millage Academy in Baldwin County, we've just come through Thanksgiving and Christmas. Those lights never went off, the blinking lights. Never went off. They do it half the time during the summer. There's not any coordination there, even with the school. I've called the headmaster, talked with them. I've tried my way through it to just get to the bottom of what's going on. They don't seem to have control either. So we support getting rid of 225. If there's a compromise to it, we've got to see it come back to some kind of local control where there can be a dialogue between the independent school and the community to let's make some sense here, because why are we putting up cameras in places that they're really not even needed? But that's to say, please don't hear me wrong. We're all about school safety. I did that. I could have hired 2 teachers every year when I was headmaster for what I paid those off-duty officers. But we care that much about independent schools, and a lot of our independent schools do that.
The school zones you're talking about in Baldwin County with the flashing lights consistently on, do they have the cameras there?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Yes, they
Thank
sure
you.
do.
Yes,
Yes.
Chairman Albers.
Thank you for coming today. I appreciate seeing you as always. So you're saying in the independent schools, the state has designated that a school zone because it's still a school, whether it be a public, private, doesn't matter, right? But the way the current camera process works is they've obviously gone to the local municipality and the public school system because they have to agree before a camera went in, but as independent school, you had no say in it.
That's correct.
Well, that's a huge gap.
Yep.
Wow.
They were put up.
Yeah, let's take a minute and make sure we just heard that properly.
No, and we had this conversation yesterday, and is Brookstone part of your association?
They are.
And the cameras in front of Brookstone, or Brookstone did not ask for those cameras?
After our conversation, I called the headmaster who was there at the time, and he said absolutely not. Their parents started screaming about it. I said, well, I think there's maybe a misunderstanding that you all requested them. He said, no, we didn't. I was there at the time. No, we did not request them.
Okay.
Why do I get
That's-
Baldwin
that's a
County
great- that's a great-
to answer that question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think that would be great. There's also discussion about Tallulah Falls here this morning.
Right.
And this weekend, I was with the president of Tallulah Falls, and he said in the beginning, it was a great idea out there to maybe slow some traffic down because the problem was that they didn't have a decel lane with enough length to it. And so he said the decel lane was fixed. Either they did it or DOT came by or something got done. He said in the meantime that he's been told they're getting $3 million right out in the front of his campus on that big 4-lane.
Who's they?
I guess whoever's
The
getting the money.
county or the
Yeah.
city?
Right.
Yeah.
And the last thing I would just say about the bill with 651, the idea that in a district that the monies would be to a school district, can you imagine the response of the independent school to that? We don't get state funds now. We don't want state funds. We don't want the strings attached to that. That's an entanglement we
So
just don't want.
you saying you would be opposed to public schools receiving any funds off of these school cameras because independent schools will not have the same opportunity?
No, I'm saying is independent schools don't want those funds.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
Perfect,
I'm
thank
saying
you.
Independent schools do not. Again, we're all about school safety.
Yeah.
We appreciate you all, and we would really prefer 225. But if there has to be some kind of compromise to it, let's get it back to some local control.
All right, we're going to fly through this. Chief Grogan.
I'm going to get Sheriff Massey and you and I on a call today from Baldwin County.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you all for your service. My name is Bill Grogan. I'm the Chief of Police for the city of Norcross, the great city of Norcross in Gwinnett County. I've been chief for about 9 years. I'm in my 22nd year in law enforcement. I've served in the military doing intelligence, and so I am as anti-anecdotal as you get. I'm a data-driven person to the core. I have a degree from computer information systems right here at Georgia State University. So I'm with you, Chairman. I like facts. So I think for time's sake, it'd probably be quicker if I read what I've got here. Stop me at any time, please. City of Norcross is 6.2 square miles. It is a very small population. As you likely know, we border I-85 in southwest Gwinnett County and fall north of DeKalb and I-285. The 2020 census had us at about 17,600 people. However, in some school days, we have upwards of 180,000 vehicles that travel through that 6.2 square miles. With every passing year, that number increases as Gwinnett County, Metro Atlanta population also increases. Our popularity in the area where you are in is a cut-through. There's traffic that cuts through us, and that popularity comes with challenges. In 2018 and 2019, Norcross police officers were dispatched to over 2,000 vehicle crashes in that 6.2 square miles each of those 2 years. After the legislature adopted the automated school zone speed detection statute, we began looking at what school areas we have the most vehicle crashes. In 2020, we put automated school zone speed cameras in 4 of 8 schools that we have school zones in our city. So 6.2 square miles, we have 8 school zones. I heard someone speak earlier that they have 5 in their entire county. I've got a problem. So we found that 4 of the 8 had a high number of vehicle crashes in a half-mile radius around each. The other half had low numbers of vehicle crashes and lower speeds, which we believe did not justify the need for this type of enforcement, and to this day, that still stands true. Those locations do not have cameras. One of the many positive effects of doing what we have done is to free up valuable police officer time so that they can get back into neighborhoods and businesses to prevent crimes versus dangerous crash sites for 20 minutes and sometimes well over an hour, and multiple officers tied up at those crash sites. So my number one goal was to reduce crashes and reduce injuries because of those crashes. The first month that we had this program in place in those 4 schools, in September of 2020, over 12,000 warnings were issued in that first month. That's an exorbitant amount of speeding, and that was at over the 11 miles per hour. So that's nearly 600 cars each day that first month. And now let's fast forward to the current school year that we are in, 2024 and 2025. We're seeing an average of over 50,000 vehicles drive through those 4 school zones every school day. And unlike the number of speeding violations, that volume of traffic is increasing with each new month and each new school year. However, even with the ever-increasing volume of cars on our roads, we are now just averaging 125 violations a day in comparison to the 600 violations that we had in September of 2020. That's about 80% in reduction, by the way, and it's a tremendous number. So 125 violations out of 50,000 plus vehicles is only 0.25% of the cars that are driving through the school zones. And that's only about 20%. For my Norcross residents and business owners, I thank them for driving safely through our city, because only 3% of the 0.25% are actually Norcross businesses or Norcross residents. I don't even think that qualifies as a number. All right, so we accomplished our mission of lowering speeds. That's not anecdotal. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we gotta hurry.
So the last thing really is that we want to reduce crashes and injuries, and this is the most important thing. 1 out of every 3 crashes has some type of reported injuries. We now, this past year, went from over 2,000 accidents before this program, and last year we only had about 1,200 accidents. So over 800 fewer accidents since we've had this put into place.
Chief, you gave me permission to stop you.
Yes,
so
sir.
I'm gonna exercise that. Could I cut through the chase, and do you support this equipment?
I do, with some guardrails.
Tell me what the guardrails are.
So we have in 2 of our 4 school zones the radar speed feedback signs that tell you your speed. One is on a county road. I'd ask that you not tell Gwinnett County, but because that's their.
You just did.
All right.
Go ahead, Chief.
The other is the City of Norcross Road that we have access to. It's our power, and so we did it there. I would actually like to make friends with GDOT and DPS today to be able to put them on Beaver Ruin Road, which is a state route, and I'd like to be able to do that on that road as well. So we have it on 2 of 4, and I would welcome that to be part of the new, any kind of modified legislation.
And Chief, I would love to talk to you offline. I would appreciate any of your recommendations.
And I have a slew of them, yes,
Very
sir.
articulate. Side note, or do you know anyone by the name of Ed Setzler?
The name sounds familiar.
I need to introduce y'all. You may have found a long lost cousin. I'm not sure. It's uncanny, your delivery and articulation.
If I could just add one thing. We
Yes,
have
sir.
used the fine revenue that has come for this from some really phenomenal things. All right, we have mental health clinicians that we pay full-time. We have 2 of them.
Is this in the school system?
This is, no, for the police department.
Oh,
So the
okay.
funds that, that are allocated through the state statute for public safety initiatives.
Yes, sir.
We pay for mental health clinicians. We have a Brazilian jiu-jitsu program that trains our officers to actually be safer in how they interact with people.
That's a great
Crisis
program.
intervention training and so forth.
Yeah.
So that's another thing, the guardrails. I think that money needs to be used for those specific types of things.
Chief, I really appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
To those of you who have not testified today, some of you I know have testified in the past. People complained about a 6 a.m. meeting. I want to point out that we have people that have not testified, and it is almost 9 o'clock. This is a 3-hour meeting. This is how things are done on the Senate side. This is how things are done in Senate Public Safety, thanks to Chairman John Albers. And so I appreciate all the information that came in today. I think now we have about 6 hours of testimony on these particular devices. I'll be completing my report and getting it back to Senator Albers post haste, and hopefully we will come up with something that everyone can live with. And with that, as chairman of this subcommittee, we are adjourned.